Hello, sleepy soul. The night is quiet, the world is asleep, and something is waiting in the dark. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and write your country and current time in the comments. Now listen carefully. Have you ever been somewhere so quiet that the quiet starts to feel alive? That was the first thing I noticed about the Yukon. Not the cold, although the cold was brutal. Not the darkness, even though by December the sun barely seemed interested in coming up. It was the silence. It pressed against the cabin walls at night. It filled the spaces between my thoughts. Sometimes, when the wind stopped, I could hear the blood moving in my own ears. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I was 24 when I took a winter job in a small Yukon town I won't name. Not because I'm trying to be mysterious. I just don't think the people there would appreciate me dragging their town into this. It was the kind of place that barely showed up on maps. One main road, a gas station that also sold groceries, a diner with 6 tables, a post office, a clinic open 3 days a week, a lot of snow, a lot of trees, and mountains that looked close enough to touch but were probably miles away. I went there because I needed money and distance. My dad had died that summer, and after the funeral, I felt like my whole life had become a room I couldn't breathe in. I dropped out of college, ignored calls from old friends, and started taking whatever work I could find. Through a friend of a friend, I heard about a winter maintenance job at a mining supply depot up north. Basic labor, stocking parts, keeping generators running, clearing ice. Nothing fancy. They needed someone young, strong, and willing to live in a cabin outside town until spring. That was me, apparently. The cabin sat about a mile past the last cluster of houses, off a narrow road that was more packed snow than gravel. It belonged to the company, though belonged seemed generous. It was small and square, with faded green siding, a metal roof, and a wood stove that smoked if the wind came from the east. Inside, it had 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a couch that smelled like old wool, and windows that rattled whenever the wind pushed through the valley. Behind it was a thick stand of black spruce trees, and beyond those, according to the map, an old trail that used to connect to another settlement years ago. The manager, a man named Roy, drove me out there my first day. Roy was in his 60s, with a beard like steel wool and hands so cracked they looked carved from old leather. He helped me carry in my bags, showed me the breaker panel, the propane tank, and the emergency radio. Then, before he left, he stood by the back window and pointed through the glass. "You see that line there?" I looked. Behind the cabin, the snow lay smooth and untouched, except for a faint depression running between the trees. It looked like an old path, buried under maybe 3 feet of snow. "Yeah," I said. "Don't shovel it." I thought he was joking. "What?" "That old path behind the cabin. Leave it alone." "Why?" Roy kept looking out the window. "Ground's bad back there." "Bad how?" "Soft in places. Old timber under the snow. You step wrong, you could break through and twist an ankle. Or worse." That sounded reasonable enough, but something about the way he said it didn't sit right with me. "Okay," I said. "I won't." He turned from the window. "I mean it, Daniel. Front path only. Roadside only. Don't go digging behind the cabin." Then he left me there. For the first week, everything was normal. Hard, cold, boring, but normal. I worked from 7 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. I came home before dark, chopped wood, heated soup, read old paperbacks I found on a shelf, and tried not to think too much. The isolation didn't bother me at first. Honestly, I liked it. There was no noise, no drama, no one asking if I was okay. Most nights, I fell asleep early from exhaustion. Then came the first morning I found the path cleared. I woke up around 6 to the sound of wind dragging snow across the roof. The cabin was freezing, so I pulled on my socks, fed the stove, and went to make coffee. When I passed the back window, I stopped. The old path behind the cabin had been shoveled. Not fully down to dirt, because nothing was down to dirt out there in January, but cleared enough to walk. A narrow trench cut through the deep snow, leading from the back steps into the spruce trees. At first, I just stared at it. The snowbanks on both sides were clean and straight, like someone had done it carefully with a shovel. The path curved into the trees and disappeared. My first thought was Roy. Maybe he'd come back early to check on something. Maybe there was a reason the path needed clearing after all. But there were no tire tracks on the road. No footprints leading from the front of the cabin around to the back. Just the cleared path. I mentioned it to Roy at work. He stopped tightening a bolt on a generator and looked at me. What do you mean cleared? I mean someone shoveled it. When? Last night, I guess. He wiped his hands on a rag. You didn't do it? No. You told me not to. Roy stared at me long enough that I started feeling like I was being accused of something. Then he said, "Don't walk it." I wasn't planning to. Good. That's it. He went back to the generator. That's it. But that was not it. Because the next morning, after another night of heavy snowfall, the path was cleared again. And the morning after that. And the morning after that. It didn't matter how much snow fell. It didn't matter how hard the wind blew. Every morning, when I looked out the back window, the path was there, freshly opened. Clean edges. Packed center. No footprints. That was the part one couldn't get past. If someone was shoveling, where were the footprints? One afternoon, I brought it up at the diner. There were 4 locals sitting near the counter, drinking coffee and talking about a snowmobile that had broken down near the river. I waited for a pause, then said, "Does anyone know why the path behind the company cabin keeps getting cleared?" Every conversation stopped. Not gradually. Stopped. The waitress, Nora, was pouring coffee into a mug. She froze with the pot tilted, coffee rising too close to the rim. Roy was there too, sitting 2 stools down from me. He didn't look surprised, just tired. One of the older men at the counter, a guy named Clive, turned slowly and said, "You staying in the north cabin?" I nodded. He gave Roy a look. Roy sighed. Company needed someone there. Clive's mouth tightened. Nora set down the coffee pot. "Don't use that path," she said. "I'm not. I'm just asking who's clearing it." No one answered. I tried to laugh it off. Is this some kind of local thing? Like messing with the new guy? Nobody smiled. Clive leaned closer. "You hear anything yet?" I didn't like the way he asked that. "Hear what?" He looked at Roy again. Roy said, "Leave it alone." That night, I locked the back door for the first time. I know that sounds insane. Out there, people barely locked anything. But I slid the deadbolt shut and put a chair under the handle anyway. It made me feel stupid, but slightly better. Around 2:13 in the morning, I woke up. Not suddenly. Not from a nightmare. I just opened my eyes. The fire had burned low. The cabin was dark except for a weak red glow from the stove. Wind whispered around the corners of the house. Then I heard it. Knock. 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 I lay still, staring at the ceiling. The sound was soft but clear. Not from the front door. Not from the walls. From beneath me. Knock. 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 3 slow taps under the floor. I told myself it was pipes. Except the cabin didn't have pipes under that part of the floor. The water tank was in the kitchen. The bedroom sat over a shallow crawl space and frozen ground. Again. Knock. 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 This time it came from under the bed. I sat up so fast my head spun. For a while I didn't move. I just listened, blanket pulled up to my chest like a child. Nothing. Then, from somewhere beneath the floorboards, came the faintest sound of scraping, like fingernails dragging across wood. I slept on the couch after that, with every light on. The next morning, the path behind the cabin was cleared again. But this time, there was something on the back step. A mitten. Small. Brown. Frozen stiff. It looked old, the wool worn thin and crusted with ice. Not mine. Not anyone's I knew. I didn't touch it. At work, I told Roy about the knocking. He didn't dismiss it. That scared me more than anything. He closed his office door and sat down heavily behind his desk. "You need to move into town," he said. "What?" "I'll call the company. Tell them the cabin's got a heating problem." "Roy, what is happening?" He rubbed his face. For a second he looked much older. That cabin shouldn't have been rented. Then why was it? Because people forget, or pretend to. I sat across from him. "Tell me." He looked at the office window. Snow tapped softly against the glass. There used to be another house there, he said. Long before the cabin. Back in the 70s. Family lived there. Father, mother, 2 kids. House sat lower, closer to the tree line. I said nothing. One winter, storm came through. Bad one. Worse some people had seen. Snow came down for days. Wind buried everything. By the time folks got out there, the house was gone. What do you mean gone? I mean buried. Roof collapsed under snow load. Whole structure pancaked and drifted over. They found part of it in spring. My mouth went dry. The family? Roy didn't answer right away. They found some of them. Some. The mother and 1 child. The father was never found. Neither was the older boy. I thought about the mitten on my step. Why build a cabin there? Company bought the land later. People said the exact spot was farther back. Records weren't clear. It was cheaper to ignore the stories. That was such a human answer it made me sick. What about the path? Roy leaned back. Old path led to their back door. Locals used to say it cleared itself after storms, like somebody still needed a way home. And the knocking? His eyes met mine. That's new. I moved into the spare room above the depot that night. At least I tried to. Roy and I drove to the cabin after work to get my things. He brought Clive with him, which didn't make me feel better. Clive carried a shotgun, not dramatically, not like he expected to fight something, but like a man who believed tools should match the job. The sun had already dropped behind the mountains, leaving that strange blue half-light that makes everything look dead. When we pulled up to the cabin, the front door was open. I knew I had locked it. Roy stopped the truck, but didn't turn off the engine. "Stay here," he said. Of course I didn't. I got out because my clothes, wallet, laptop, and half my life were in there. And because fear and denial can make you stupid in very practical ways. The cabin was colder inside than outside. That is the only way I can describe it. The air felt stale and deep, like a cellar that hadn't been opened in years. Snow had blown in through the front door and dusted the entryway. Nothing seemed stolen, but every cabinet was open, every drawer. The couch cushions had been pulled off and stacked neatly in the middle of the floor. My books were lined up on the kitchen table, tallest to shortest. My boots had been placed beside the back door, toes facing out. Then we heard the knocking. This time it was loud. Not soft taps. Pounding. From beneath the floor. Boom. 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 Dust jumped between the floorboards. Clive raised the shotgun. Roy grabbed my sleeve. We're leaving. But the back door opened. None of us touched it. It opened inward, slowly, chair scraping along the floor until it tipped over. Beyond it, the cleared path led into the trees. And from somewhere under the cabin, under the frozen ground, a voice called out. It was muffled and thin, like someone speaking through dirt. "Don't let it follow the path." I stopped breathing. Roy's face went gray. The voice came again. "Don't let it follow the path." Clive whispered, "That ain't asking to be dug out." The floorboards near the bedroom creaked. Not underneath. On top. Something inside the cabin shifted its weight. I turned slowly. The bedroom door was half open. In the darkness beyond it, a man stood facing the wall. He was tall and hunched, wearing what looked like old winter clothes stiff with ice and dirt. His arms hung too long at his sides. His head tilted forward, forehead almost touching the wallpaper. For one horrible second, none of us moved. Then his head turned. I didn't see his face clearly. The cabin was too dark, but I saw enough. Pale skin stretched tight. Dark holes where the eyes should have caught light. A mouth slightly open, like it was listening through us instead of looking at us. Roy pulled me backward. "Run." The thing in the bedroom moved. Not fast at first. Just one step. The floor groaned under it. Then another. Clive fired once. The blast inside that tiny cabin was deafening. I shouted and ducked. The thing jerked back but did not fall. Then it smiled. Not with humor. Not even with anger. It smiled like it had learned the shape from watching people. We ran. I slipped on the snowy steps and smashed my knee hard enough to see white sparks. Roy hauled me up by my jacket. Behind us, something hit the cabin doorway so hard the frame cracked. We reached the truck. Clive jumped into the bed instead of the cab, still holding the shotgun. Roy threw the truck into reverse before my door was even closed. As we backed down the drive, I looked at the cabin. The thing stood in the open front doorway. Behind it, through the kitchen window, I could see the back door. And beyond that, the old path, freshly cleared, waiting. The voice under the ground started pounding again. Even from the truck, over the engine, I heard it. Knock, 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 like a warning. Roy didn't stop driving until we reached town. The police came from a larger community the next morning. Not immediately, because nothing up there happens immediately in winter. By then, half the town knew something was wrong. People stood outside the diner with coffee in gloved hands, watching the road like the forest might walk into town. When the officers reached the cabin, it had burned. Nobody knew how. The fire had taken most of the structure, but left parts of the floor exposed. Underneath, they found old timbers. Not from the cabin. Older. Crushed beams, frozen boards, fragments of wallpaper trapped under ice and soil. The house under the snow was real. They found a stairwell too. Not much of one, but enough to prove there had been a lower level. A cellar or storage room. It had been sealed under decades of snow, earth, and new construction. Inside, they found remains. I was not told details, and I didn't ask. I only know they believed one set belonged to a young male, maybe a teenager. The older boy from the family. No sign of the father. That was the detail everyone whispered about. No sign of the father. Roy quit that spring. Clive stopped coming to the diner. Nora told me once, quietly, that when she was a girl, her grandmother used to say the father didn't die in the storm. She said he came back wrong before the house was buried. Said the mother and boy trapped something downstairs, and the knocking people heard all those years was never a plea. It was a warning. Don't open the path. Don't let it remember the way out. I left the Yukon before the roads fully cleared. I told myself I was leaving because the job was over, because I missed my family, because I had saved enough money. But the truth is, I was scared of snow after that. Not storms. Not ice. Snow. The way it covers things, softens them, makes everything look clean. People think buried things stay buried because we stop seeing them. They don't. Some things wait under the weight of years, under frozen ground, under new walls built by people who don't ask enough questions. And sometimes, every morning, the path is cleared for them. I live in Vancouver now. I have neighbors on both sides, traffic outside my window, people upstairs who walk too loudly. I complain about it like anyone else, but honestly, I like the noise. I like knowing there are living people around me. Still, every winter, when snow piles against the sidewalk and the world goes quiet, I remember that cabin. I remember the back door opening by itself. I remember that voice under the floor, begging us not to misunderstand. And I remember the figure in the bedroom, standing with its face to the wall, like it had been waiting for years to hear footsteps above it again. The last thing Roy ever said to me was on the morning I left town. He shook my hand outside the depot, glanced toward the mountains, and said, "If something knocks from below, don't dig. Some doors are buried for a reason." I used to think warnings were meant to keep people away from danger. Now I know some warnings are meant to keep danger away from us. Story 2. Have you ever woken up somewhere you knew you shouldn't be? Not in a dramatic way. Not tied up in a basement or stranded in some abandoned building. I mean somewhere normal. Somewhere public. Somewhere you've been 100 times before. But suddenly every little detail is wrong, and your brain starts quietly telling you, before you can explain it, that you need to get out. That happened to me on the Toronto subway. My name is Adam Ramon. I'm 27 now, but this happened when I was 21, during my 3rd year of college in Toronto. I was studying graphic design at the time, living in a basement apartment near North York with 2 other guys who were barely home. I worked evenings at a small print shop near Queen Street, mostly helping people with posters, menus, business cards, and last-minute school projects. My life back then was ordinary in the way student life is ordinary. Not peaceful, exactly, but repetitive. Classes in the morning. Work in the evening. Cheap coffee. Convenience store dinner. Laundry done at midnight, because that was when the machines were free. I was always tired, always behind on something, always telling myself that once the semester ended, I'd finally sleep properly. I took the subway almost every day. If you know Toronto, you know how automatic it becomes. You stop thinking about it. You tap your card, squeeze past someone's backpack, stand by the doors, stare at ads you've already seen 50 times, and let the train carry you through the city. The same station names, the same beeps, the same tired people pretending not to look at each other. That night started like any other late night. It was November 12th. Cold rain had been falling since the afternoon, the kind that makes the sidewalks shine under streetlights and turns everyone's coat dark at the shoulders. I had worked late because a restaurant owner came in 20 minutes before closing with a menu file that looked like it had been designed by a drunk raccoon. My boss asked me to stay and fix it, and I said yes because I needed the hours. By the time I locked up and got to Oskard Station, it was a little after midnight. The platform was mostly empty. A guy in a Leafs hoodie sat on a bench with his head back, eyes closed. A woman in scrubs stood near the yellow line, scrolling on her phone. Somewhere farther down, a man played music quietly from a speaker in his backpack. The air smelled like wet coats, metal rails, and that warm underground dust every subway station has. I remember feeling safe. Tired, annoyed, but safe. That's what people don't understand about things like this. Fear doesn't usually announce itself. It doesn't step out of the dark wearing a mask. Most of the time, it starts in a place so normal you don't even think to be careful. The train came in with that familiar rush of air. I got on the northbound side, found a seat near the middle of the car, and put my bag on my lap. There were maybe 7 people in the car with me. A couple whispering by the doors. An older man reading a folded newspaper. A woman with grocery bags. Nobody memorable. I texted my roommate, Jay, that I was on my way. He replied, "Bring chips if the store is open." I wrote back, "Absolutely not." Then I put in one earbud, leaned my head against the window, and closed my eyes. I didn't mean to sleep. You never do. But I was exhausted. The rocking of the train, the warm air, the soft mechanical voice announcing stations, it all blurred together. St. Patrick, Queen's Park, Museum, St. George. At some point, I drifted off. When I woke up, the train was still moving. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Not because trains don't move, obviously, but because I woke with that sudden jolt you get when your body knows you missed something. My neck hurt from leaning against the window. My mouth was dry. One earbud had fallen into my lap. I sat up and looked around. The car was empty. Completely empty. No couple. No newspaper man. No woman with groceries. Nobody in the seats. Nobody standing. Just me, fluorescent lights, dirty windows, and the faint rattle of the train moving through the tunnel. At first, I thought I had missed my stop and ended up at the end of the line. It had happened once before. You fall asleep, wake up at Finch or Vaughan, curse yourself, and wait for the train to go back the other way. But the train wasn't stopped, and the station sign outside the window, when we passed it, did not say Finch. It said, Morningdale. I blinked. The platform slid by slowly, close enough for me to see white tiles, green trim, and a row of empty benches. No people, no ads, no garbage cans, just a station I had never heard of. Morningdale. Under the station name, someone had written a date in black paint across the wall. November 13th. Tomorrow's date. At first, I thought I had misread it. The train picked up speed again, and the station disappeared behind us. I pulled out my phone. No service. That wasn't strange underground, but it still bothered me. The time on my screen said 12:46 a.m. My last message from Jay had been sent 38 minutes earlier. I opened the TTC map screenshot I kept on my phone. There was no Morningdale. Of course there wasn't. I stood up, grabbing the pole as the train rocked. "Hello?" I called. My voice sounded small in the empty car. No answer. I walked to the next car, through the connecting doors. Empty. Then the next. Empty. Every seat was clear. No bags. No trash. No sleeping passengers. It was like everyone had stepped off at once without waking me. The train kept moving. The lights flickered once. I told myself it was nothing. That's what you do at the beginning. You build normal explanations as fast as you can because the alternative is too big. Maybe the train had gone out of service, and I somehow got left on it. Maybe it was a maintenance route. Maybe Morningdale was some old closed platform. Maybe the date was graffiti. Maybe I was still half asleep. Then the intercom crackled. A woman's recorded voice said, "Next station." Static. Then in a man's voice, low and distorted, it said, "Bathurst North." I froze. Bathurst North was not a station. The train slowed. I moved to the window. A platform appeared out of the darkness. Same white tiles. Same green trim. Same empty benches. The sign on the wall said, "Bathurst North," and underneath it, in the same black paint, November 13th. The doors opened. The chime sounded. No one got on. No one got off. I stood in the middle of the car, staring at the open doors. Across the platform, there was a payphone mounted to the wall. That was impossible enough by itself. I hadn't seen a working payphone in a subway station in years. This one looked old, yellowed with age, receiver hanging slightly crooked. Then it rang. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed through the empty platform. The doors stayed open. I should have stayed on the train. I know that now. But at the time, I was scared in a stupid, practical way. The kind of scared where you still think there's a solution if you can just talk to someone. A TTC employee, a police officer, anyone. So I stepped off. The platform felt colder than the train. The air was still and damp, and every sound had that hollow underground echo. The train doors remained open behind me. The phone kept ringing. I walked toward it slowly. My shoes squeaked against the tile. When I was a few feet away, the ringing stopped. I waited. Then the receiver moved. Just a little, like someone on the other end had touched it. I backed away. The intercom above the platform clicked on. "Adam Rahman," a voice said. I stopped breathing. It wasn't the normal announcement voice anymore. It was a man speaking clearly, like he was standing with his mouth close to a microphone. "Please return to the train." My heart sank into my stomach as the train doors clicked shut behind me, and I realized I was completely alone. Someone was watching, and I had no way out. I turned and ran. The train was still there, doors closed. I slapped the button, even though I knew those buttons didn't work the way people think they do. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then the doors opened. I stumbled inside, and they closed immediately after me. The train started moving. I grabbed a pole and tried to breathe. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, wake up." I slapped my own face once, hard enough to make my cheeks sting. Nothing changed. The train kept going. The next station was called Lark Street. Same empty platform. Same date. November 13th. The one after that was Dufferin East. Then Silver Yard. Then Lower Christie. None of them were on any map I had ever seen. Some looked unfinished, with exposed concrete walls and plastic sheeting hanging from the ceiling. Others looked old, like stations from the 1950s that had been sealed away and forgotten. But every single one had tomorrow's date written somewhere on the wall. Sometimes in paint, sometimes chalk, once scratched directly into the tile. November 13th. At first, I thought the date was a warning. Then I thought it was a countdown. Then I stopped trying to guess, because fear had started taking up too much room in my head. I moved through the train again, looking for an emergency intercom. I found one near the doors and pressed the button. It clicked. "Hello," I said. "I'm on a train. I think it went out of service. I don't know where I am." For a moment, only static. Then a dispatcher's voice came through. "Sir, what train are you on?" Relief hit me so hard my knees almost gave out. "I don't know. Northbound from Osked." I fell asleep. "I'm in some kind of tunnel. The stations aren't normal. Can you identify the next station?" I looked out the window as the train slowed again. The sign appeared. Elmwood transfer. And underneath, November 13th. It says Elmwood transfer, I said. The line went quiet. Hello? The dispatcher came back, but her voice sounded different now. Flatter. Sir, there is no Elmwood transfer. I know that. Are you alone? Yes. Are the lights on? Yes. Do not get off at the next 3 stops. My mouth went dry. What? Do not get off at the next 3 stops. Why? Static crackled. Then she said, You already did. The intercom went dead. I backed away from it. I remember laughing once, a short, ugly sound that didn't feel like mine. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the whisper of footsteps from the hallway between train cars made me freeze, every nerve screaming that I was not imagining this. Footsteps, not mechanical noise, not the train shifting. Someone was walking in the next car, slowly. 1 step. Pause. Another step. I turned toward the connecting door. Through the grimy glass, I saw a figure. A man, standing in the next car, facing me. He wore a dark TTC jacket and a black cap pulled low. I couldn't see his face clearly because the lights in his car were flickering. 1 second he was there. The next, darkness. Then there again. I told myself he was an operator, a worker, someone who could help. But he didn't move toward me like someone coming to help. He just stood there, one hand wrapped around a pole, watching me. The train entered another station. The man in the next car lifted one hand and pointed toward the doors on my side. The sign outside read, Wellington Loop, November 13th. The doors opened. I stayed still. The man kept pointing. Then the platform lights went out one by one, starting at the far end, moving toward my car. Click, click, click. Darkness swallowed the benches, the tiles, the sign. The last light above my doors flickered. The man in the next car shook his head slowly. The doors began to close. Just before they shut, something hit the outside of the train. Hard. A palm slapped against the window beside me. I jumped back. A woman stood on the platform. She was pressed close to the glass, eyes wide, mouth open like she was screaming, but no sound came through. Her clothes looked normal. Winter coat, scarf, backpack. She looked like any commuter I might have passed 100 times. Then another person appeared behind her. Then another. All standing on the dark platform, reaching toward the train as the doors closed. The train pulled away. I fell into a seat, shaking. This was the point where I started crying. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just tears coming down while I tried to type messages that wouldn't send. Jay, my mom, 9/11, anyone. No service, no bars, no help. The train kept moving through stations that didn't exist. At one point, the windows went black, and for a few minutes I saw nothing outside but my own reflection. I looked pale and wild-eyed, clutching my backpack like a kid. Then something appeared in the reflection behind me. The TTC man, standing inside my car. I spun around. He was there, about 10 feet away. Same dark jacket, same cap. His face was older than I expected, maybe late 50s, with tired eyes and gray stubble. He didn't look like a monster. He looked exhausted. That made him scarier somehow. Who are you? I asked. He didn't answer. Are you real? He looked toward the front of the train, then back at me. You missed your stop, he said. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in a long time. What stop? The one where you should have woken up. I don't understand. He sat across from me. The train rocked between us. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Then he said, You fell asleep after St. George. The train kept going. Tomorrow night, you'll do the same thing. What do you mean tomorrow night? He pointed out the window. A station rushed past too fast to read. But I saw the date again. November 13th. Tomorrow night, he said. This train doesn't stop where it's supposed to. I shook my head. No, this is a dream. I wish it was. Are you saying there's going to be an accident? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me. It was a subway map, but not the kind you see posted in stations. This one had red lines drawn over it by hand. Marks, arrows, notes, some station names circled, others crossed out. At the top, written in black pen, was November 13th, last route before impact. The word impact made my stomach turn. What is this? The route it takes when the signals fail. Signals don't just fail like that. The man looked at me sadly. Everything fails if enough people ignore small problems. The street above us, if there even was a street above us, felt impossibly far away. I thought about Toronto going on like normal. People sleeping in condos. Streetcars sparking along wet roads. Students leaving bars. Someone buying cigarettes at a corner store. A city alive and unaware, while I sat underground with a man telling me tomorrow had already started going wrong. Why me? I asked. Because you sleep through things, he said. That answer made no sense, and yet it felt personal enough to hurt. The train slowed. The man stood. Next stop, don't get off. I thought you said I missed my stop. You did, but not all wrong stops kill you. The doors opened at a station called Mercer Hollow. November 13th was painted across the wall in huge, uneven letters. On the platform stood the same woman I had seen earlier, the one with the scarf and backpack. Only now she was smiling. She raised her hand and waved at me. Behind her, more people stood in a line. Quiet, waiting. The man in the TTC jacket stepped between me and the doors. Do not look at them too long, he said. Who are they? Passengers. From the accident? He looked at the platform. From every version where nobody listened. The doors closed. The train moved on. I know how this sounds. I know it sounds like some ghost train story, like one of those things people tell online to scare strangers. But that is not what it felt like. It didn't feel old. It didn't feel haunted in the way movies make things haunted. It felt mechanical, scheduled, like I had slipped into the wrong part of a system that was still running exactly as designed, even if the design was broken. The man sat down again. What's your name? I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. Martin, do you work for TTC? I did. Did? He didn't answer. The train lights dimmed. For the first time, I noticed something on his jacket. A small embroidered patch above the chest pocket. It had a name. M. Holloway. Under it was a dark stain that spread down one side of the fabric. I looked away. Minimal as it was, the sight made my stomach twist. He noticed. Don't focus on that, he said. Focus on getting off at the right stop. Which one? You'll know. No, that's not helpful. Tell me. I can't. Why not? Because I'm not the one who got off. Before I could ask what that meant, the intercom crackled again. The normal recorded voice said, "Next station is St. Clair West." For 1 second, relief hit me. A real station. A station I knew. Then Martin's face changed. Do not get off. But that's real. No. The train slowed into St. Clair West, or something pretending to be it. At first glance, it looked exactly right. The curved walls, the platform shape, the signs, the yellow line. But the ads were wrong. Every ad panel showed the same image. A blurry photo of the train car I was sitting in. Inside the photo, passengers filled every seat. And in the middle, asleep by the window, was me. The doors opened. A normal-looking station employee stood on the platform, smiling. "Sir," he called, "you need to exit the train." Martin stood very still. The employee looked directly at me. "This train is out of service. Please exit." That should have been the most comforting sentence in the world. Instead, my body went cold, because the employee's smile never changed. Not once. "Adam," he said, "come on. You're holding up service." I had not told him my name. I stepped back. The employee's smile faded. Behind him, the ad screens flickered. The photo changed. Now the train car in the image was damaged, lights broken, seats twisted out of place. The passengers were blurred shapes. Nothing graphic, but enough. Enough to understand. The doors closed. The station employee slammed one palm against the glass as the train pulled away. Martin sat down slowly. You did good, he said. I was shaking too hard to answer. The next part is hard to describe because time stopped feeling normal. The train moved through tunnels that seemed too long. Sometimes we passed normal stations, but they were empty and wrong in small ways. Blur-Young with no signs except tomorrow's date. Davisville with water dripping from the ceiling. Egg Ellington with every light flickering in rhythm like a heartbeat. Other times we passed stations that definitely did not exist. Lowther, Ashbridge Deep, Crescent Yard, Terminal 0. Every wall had the same date, November 13th. Eventually, Martin explained as much as he could. Tomorrow night, he said, I would leave work late again. I would take the subway again. I would fall asleep again. And because of a signal issue, a maintenance error, and a chain of bad decisions made by people who thought they still had time, the train would be sent onto the wrong track. It would not be instant. That was the part that scared me most. He described it as a route, a sequence. Stops missed, switches ignored, warnings delayed. A train moving exactly where it should not, carrying tired people who trusted the system to know better than they did. Why can I see it now? I asked. Martin looked out the window. Sometimes, when people sleep deep enough in the wrong place, they hear the track before the train takes it. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. And if I get off at the right stop, you wake up with enough memory to change something. How? Pull the emergency alarm. Get off. Call it in. Make noise. Be difficult. I almost laughed. That's it. He looked at me. That's everything. Most disasters only need one person to be difficult at the right time. The train entered another tunnel. This one felt different. The lights in the car flickered harder. The wheels screamed against a curve. The metal around us groaned in a way I had never heard on a train before. Martin grabbed the pole. Now listen carefully, he said. The right stop won't look safe. What does that mean? It will look like the place where you're supposed to stay on. The train rocked violently. I fell sideways into the seat. An announcement played overhead, warped and layered, like several voices speaking at once. Next station, next station, next station. Then a child's voice whispered, last stop. The train began to slow. Outside the windows, a platform emerged. No station name, no ads, no benches, just raw concrete and a single stairwell leading upward into darkness. On the wall, written in black paint, was November 13th. But underneath it, smaller, almost hidden near the floor, someone had written, Wake up here. The doors opened. I looked at Martin. Is this it? He didn't answer. Martin. His face had gone pale. On the platform, I could hear something from the stairwell. People. Not voices exactly. More like a crowd far away. Shuffling. Breathing. Waiting. The air coming through the doors smelled like rain and burning rubber. I stepped toward the doors, then stopped. Every instinct told me not to get off. The platform was too dark, too empty, too much like a trap. Martin had said the right stop wouldn't look safe. I took another step. Then the intercom clicked on. Jay's voice came through. Adam. My whole body froze. My roommate. He sounded close, worried, real. Adam, don't get off there. Bro, what are you doing? I turned toward the speaker. Martin shouted, don't listen. Jay's voice continued, stay on the train. You're almost home. My eyes filled with tears. I don't know why. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe because hearing a familiar voice in that place felt like seeing a light through fog. Adam, Jay said, please. Martin grabbed my arm. His hand was ice cold. Anyone who tells you to stay on is trying to keep the route intact. The doors began to chime. I looked at the dark platform. I looked at Martin. Then, from deep in the train behind us, I heard footsteps. Many footsteps, moving toward our car. I turned. The passengers were back. Not fully, not clearly. Shapes in the flickering cars behind mine. The woman with the scarf. The newspaper man. The couple. More people I had never seen. They were moving forward slowly, car by car, all looking at me. Their faces were calm. Too calm. Jay's voice through the speaker said, last chance, Adam. The doors started closing. I ran. I jumped through the gap just before they shut. For a second, I was on the platform, stumbling forward, backpack slipping off one shoulder. Behind me, the train doors closed. Martin stood inside the car, watching me through the glass. He gave one small nod. Then the train pulled away. As it passed, the windows flashed with faces. Dozens of them. Hundreds maybe. Every person who would be on that train tomorrow if nothing changed. Then the last car disappeared into the tunnel. The platform went silent. I stood there alone. My legs were shaking so badly I could barely stay upright. The stairwell waited in front of me. There was no sign, no exit marker, no light at the top. Just concrete steps going up into blackness. I climbed. Every step felt too loud. Halfway up, my phone buzzed. I grabbed it so fast I almost dropped it. No signal, but the screen had lit up with a notification. A calendar reminder. I didn't remember setting it. It said, "Wake up before St. George." I stared at it. Then the stairwell lights flashed on all at once, blinding white. I heard the screech of brakes. Not far away, right beside me. I opened my eyes. I was back on the train. People around me. Real people. The couple by the doors. The older man with the newspaper. The woman with groceries. My earbud in my lap. My bag on my knees. The train was pulling into St. George. The announcement said, "Arriving at St. George. St. George Station." My phone read 12:23 a.m. November 12th. Still tonight. I sat there gasping. The woman across from me gave me a concerned look and shifted away slightly. Everything was normal. Painfully normal. For 2 seconds, I almost cried with relief. Then I saw him. At the far end of the car, standing by the doors, was Martin. The TTC jacket. The cap. The tired eyes. He looked at me once. Then he got off at St. George and disappeared into the crowd. I jumped up. Wait! People stared. I ran to the doors, but they were closing. I hit the button uselessly, then watched through the window as Martin walked down the platform without turning back. The train moved again. My heart started pounding. Wake up before St. George. I had woken up at St. George. Was that enough? I didn't know. The next station was Spadina. I got off. I stood on the platform, shaking, trying to decide what to do. Pull the emergency alarm? Call someone? Tell a TTC employee I had a vision of tomorrow's train accident? I'd sound insane. Worse, I might get fined, detained, ignored, or all three. I called Jay. He answered groggily. "Dude, where are you?" "Listen to me," I said. "I need you to stay awake for a minute." "What?" "I think something is going to happen on the subway tomorrow night." There was silence. "Are you drunk?" "No." "Hi." "No." "Then what are you talking about?" I told him some of it. Not all. Enough that he came to get me. While waiting, I found a station employee and tried to explain there might be a signal issue tomorrow night. He looked at me like I was exactly what I sounded like, a sleep-deprived student having some kind of breakdown. "Sir, do you need medical help?" "No. I need someone to check the northbound signals tomorrow. I can call transit control if there's an immediate issue." "It's not immediate. It's tomorrow." That didn't help my case. He told me to file a safety report online. I did, right there on my phone with shaking hands, sitting on a bench at Spadina Station while people walked around me. I wrote everything I could without mentioning impossible stations or a man named Martin, who may or may not have been dead. I said I had noticed unusual braking, signal irregularities, and possible routing confusion on a late-night northbound train. I included the time, station, direction, car number, everything I could find. Then I called the TTC customer service line and left a message. Then I emailed them. Then I called 311. Then, because panic makes you persistent, I called the police non-emergency line and reported a potential transit safety issue. Everyone was polite. Nobody sounded alarmed. Jay picked me up around 1:15. He pulled up outside the station in his old Corolla, wearing sweatpants and a winter jacket over a t-shirt. I got in. He looked at me for a few seconds. You look terrible. Thanks. No, I mean actually terrible. I fell asleep on the subway. And saw the future? I stared at him. He stopped smiling. Okay, he said. Tell me everything. So I did. The whole thing. Morningdale. The date. Martin. The stations. The people on the platform. Tomorrow's route. The warning. Jay didn't interrupt much. When I finished, we were parked outside my building, engine still running, heater blowing warm air at our faces. Finally, he said, maybe it was a dream. I know. A really vivid dream. I know. But you still sent the report. Yeah. Good. That was why Jay was a good friend. He didn't have to believe me to understand I needed someone not to laugh. The next day, November 13th, I woke up after 3 hours of sleep feeling like I had swallowed a stone. I skipped class. I called work and said I was sick. Then I spent the day checking news sites, TTC alerts, Twitter, Reddit, anything I could find about subway delays or signal problems. Nothing unusual. By afternoon, I started doubting myself. Of course I did. The daylight makes everything seem ridiculous. The city was moving normally. People were going to work. Trains were running. Coffee shops were full. My nightmare, or whatever it was, had no evidence except my own memory and a weird calendar notification that had disappeared from my phone after I woke up. At 5:42 p.m., I got an email response to my safety report. It was a generic thank you message. Your concern has been received. That was it. I sat at my desk, staring at it. The accident, if it was real, would happen after midnight. I knew that much. I told myself I had done what I could, but around 10:30 p.m., I put on my coat and left. Jay tried to stop me. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know. That is not a plan. I know. Adam, if I stay here and something happens, I won't be able to live with it. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he grabbed his keys. Fine. I'm driving. We went downtown. The city looked normal. Wet streets. Taxis. People laughing outside bars. A man yelling into his phone near a bus shelter. The streetcars moved along their tracks like sparks under the wires. The street looked ordinary, quiet, even comforting, but my gut told me something was off. I'd learned too late that danger often wears a friendly face. At 11:50, Jay and I entered Osgood Station. I felt sick walking down the stairs. The platform looked exactly like it had the night before. Same tiles, same ads, same cold underground air. At 12:06, a northbound train arrived. I looked through the windows. Same layout, same type of car. Not the same passengers, obviously, but enough tired people to make my stomach twist. A nurse, 2 students, a man with a bike, an older woman carrying a shopping bag. Ordinary people trusting that nothing strange would happen. Jay touched my arm. You okay? No. We got on. I refused to sit. I stood by the emergency alarm strip, one hand near it, trying not to look insane. The train moved. St. Patrick, Queen's Park, Museum. My breathing got worse with each station. At St. George, the doors opened. A few people got off. More got on. I looked onto the platform. No Martin. The doors closed. The train moved again. That was when the lights flickered. Just once. Most people didn't react. Jay looked at me. The intercom crackled, then went silent. The train slowed unexpectedly between stations. A long metallic squeal ran through the car. The woman with the shopping bag grabbed the pole. I heard the driver's voice over the speaker, but it cut in and out. Attention customers, we are currently being held due to static. The train jerked forward, then stopped again. Harder. People murmured. My mouth went dry. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling, as I reached for the emergency alarm. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was conspiring against me. Jay whispered, Adam? The train began moving again, but faster than before. Wrong. I don't know how else to explain it. I wasn't a subway expert. I didn't know signals or track switches. But something in the motion felt wrong, like the train had been shoved into a decision it wasn't supposed to make. I pulled the emergency alarm. The sound was sharp and immediate. People shouted. The train braked hard. Someone cursed. Jay grabbed my shoulder to keep me from falling. The train stopped in the tunnel. For a few seconds, there was chaos. People asking what happened. A man yelling that I was crazy. Someone crying. The driver's voice came over the speaker, angry and confused, asking who had activated the alarm. I pressed the intercom button and said, "There is a routing problem. You need to check the switch ahead. Check the track ahead." The driver snapped back. "Sir, why did you activate the alarm?" "Check the track ahead," I said. "Please." He didn't respond. We sat there for 10 minutes. Then 15. People got angry. Really angry. They didn't know what I knew. To them, I was just some guy who had stopped a late-night train in a tunnel for no clear reason. Transit staff eventually walked through the train. Then police came. Jay and I were escorted off when the train was moved slowly to the next station. I was questioned for almost an hour. I told the same story, but carefully. I said I felt unsafe because of the irregular movement and announcements. I said I had submitted a safety report the night before. I said I believed there was a switch or signal issue ahead. Nobody seemed convinced. Then around 2 a.m., the mood changed. One officer stepped out of the room to take a call. When he came back, he no longer looked annoyed. I'll never forget that. He looked at me differently. Not scared exactly, but unsettled. There had been a confirmed issue ahead on the line. I never got the full technical explanation. I don't know how much they even told the public. What I heard later, through bits of news reports and one brief conversation with a transit employee, who probably shouldn't have said as much as he did, was that a series of signal failures and a miscommunication during overnight maintenance had created a serious risk. Maybe not a guaranteed disaster. Maybe not exactly like Martin showed me, but serious enough that the train stopping when it did mattered. That was the official version. A delay, a safety incident, an investigation. No fatal accident, no ghost train, no stations called Morningdale or Mercer Hollow. Just a tired student pulling an emergency alarm and causing a delay that, according to one very quiet transit employee, may have prevented something much worse. I asked about Martin Holloway. Nobody knew who I meant at first. It took me months to find anything. I searched old articles, transit forums, archived news pages. Eventually, I found a small piece from years earlier about a TTC maintenance worker named Martin Holloway who had died during an overnight incident in a tunnel. The article was short, respectful, lacking detail. There was a small photo of him in uniform. Same tired eyes, same face. I printed the article once, then threw it away because having it in my room made it too real. Years have passed. I still take the subway sometimes. You can't live in Toronto and avoid it completely unless you have money I don't have. But I don't sleep on trains anymore. Ever. If I'm tired, I stand. If I feel myself drifting, I get off and wait. And every time a train slows unexpectedly in a tunnel, my body remembers before my mind does. My hands sweat. My chest tightens. I look at the doors and imagine a platform sliding into view with tomorrow's date written on the wall. People ask if I think I saved lives. I don't know. That's the honest answer. Maybe I had a nightmare and got lucky. Maybe the safety issue would have been caught anyway. Maybe pulling the alarm only made me feel important in a situation I didn't understand. But I still have one thing I can't explain. The morning after it happened, I found something in my coat pocket. A folded subway map. Not the current one. The old one Martin had handed me. It was damp, creased, and marked with red lines. At the top, in black pen, it said, November 13th, last route before impact. And near St. George, someone had circled one stop and written. He listened. I keep that map locked in a drawer now. I don't show it to people. Most wouldn't believe it anyway. But if you're ever on a subway after midnight, and you wake up to an empty train moving through stations you don't recognize, pay attention. Look at the walls. Look at the date. And if something tells you to get off at a stop that feels wrong, listen. Because sometimes the scariest part isn't being trapped on a train going nowhere. It's realizing it's going exactly where it was always going to go. Story 3. The first time I saw the woman in the window, I thought she was just another guest. That's the part that bothers me now. Not the storm, not the old hotel, not even the sealed hallway I eventually broke into like an idiot because I couldn't leave things alone. What bothers me is how normal she looked at first. Just a woman standing in a dark window across the courtyard, watching snow fall over Banff. Except she wasn't watching the snow. She was watching our room. And by the third night, I understood she had been waiting for us long before my wife and I ever checked in. My name is Ethan Calloway. I was 32 when this happened, and my wife, Mara, was 30 at the time. We lived in Calgary, and that winter had been rough on both of us in that quiet, exhausting way marriages sometimes get rough. Not dramatic. No cheating, no screaming, no smashed plates. Just distance. We were both working too much. She was a nurse. I worked in IT for a logistics company. Our schedules barely lined up, and when they did, we were usually too tired to be good company. We had started speaking in practical sentences. Did you pay the bill? Can you grab milk? Your mom called. Dishwasher's leaking again. You know how it is. Life doesn't always fall apart loudly. Sometimes it just goes thin. So I booked 2 nights at an old hotel in Banff as a surprise. I won't name the hotel, for reasons that will make sense, but anyone who has been to Banff knows the kind of place I mean. Historic stone building, tall windows, dark wood lobby, framed black and white photos of guests from decades ago. A little too beautiful in a way that makes you feel like you're sleeping inside someone else's memory. Mara loved old hotels. I thought it would help. A snowstorm rolled in the same afternoon we drove out. At first it was pretty. Big soft flakes drifting past the windshield, mountains half hidden behind white mist, pine trees bending under fresh snow. We stopped for coffee on the way, and for the first time in weeks, Mara laughed at something I said. I remember thinking, okay, this was a good idea. By the time we reached Banff, the storm had turned heavy. The streets were slick, the sky was low and gray, and people walked with their shoulders hunched against the wind. The hotel looked unreal through the falling snow, all warm windows and steep roofs, like something from a postcard you'd find in a gift shop. Inside, the lobby smelled like cedar, wet wool, and fireplace smoke. A young woman at the front desk checked us in. Her name tag said Paige. She was polite, tired-looking, and kept glancing toward the front windows like she was worried about the storm. "Roads are getting bad," she said as she handed me the key cards. "You picked a dramatic weekend." Mara smiled. "We were hoping for snow." "You got it." Paige gave us a map of the hotel because the place was old enough to be confusing. There were multiple wings, staircases that didn't go where you expected, and hallways that turned into lounges or dead ends. She circled our room on the 3rd floor. "North wing," she said. "Nice view of the courtyard." Then her pen hovered over a section on the map that had been shaded gray. "This part is closed," she added. "Old West Wing. Renovation work. Guests aren't allowed past the service doors." I barely paid attention. "Got it." Mara did, though. "Is it haunted?" she asked, half joking. Paige's smile appeared and disappeared quickly. "It's old," she said. "Old buildings make noises." That was the first small thing. Not scary by itself, just the way she avoided answering. Our room was beautiful. Not huge, but warm and cozy, with heavy curtains, a narrow writing desk, a king bed, and a window looking down over a courtyard buried in snow. Across the courtyard stood another section of the hotel, darker than ours, with tall arched windows and decorative stone ledges. Most of those windows were black. A few were boarded from the inside. "That must be the closed wing," Mara said, dropping her bag near the closet. I looked over. The west wing sat at a slight angle from us, separated by maybe 40 feet of courtyard. Snow whipped between the buildings in ghostly sheets. "Kind of creepy," I said. "Kind of gorgeous." She came up beside me and leaned her head on my shoulder. For a second, it felt like us again. We unpacked. We had dinner downstairs in the hotel restaurant. Mara ordered wine. I had steak. We talked about stupid things on purpose. A dog we saw wearing boots. A co-worker of hers who kept stealing yogurt from the staff fridge. Whether rich people actually use decorative pillows or just move them from bed to chair every night like everyone else. It was good. By 10, the storm was bad enough that the windows in the dining room trembled every time the wind hit the building. Staff moved quietly between tables. Guests lingered over drinks because nobody wanted to go outside. When we went back upstairs, the hallway lights had dimmed into that warm yellow glow old hotels always seem to have at night. Mara got ready for bed while I stood at the window, brushing my teeth, staring out at the courtyard. That was when I saw her. Across the way, in one of the dark West Wing windows, a woman stood perfectly still. She was on the same floor as us, maybe one level higher. I couldn't see details, just her outline. Long dark hair, pale face, a high-neck dress or blouse maybe. She stood close to the glass with her hands at her sides, and she was facing me. I stopped brushing. At first, I assumed she was staff. Maybe the wing wasn't fully sealed. Maybe someone was doing maintenance or checking storm damage. But she didn't move. Snow streamed between us, lit by courtyard lamps, and every few seconds the wind would blur her shape. Then it would clear, and she would still be there. Mara came out of the bathroom. "What are you looking at?" "Someone's in the closed wing." She came to the window and squinted. "Where?" I pointed. "That window, third from the left." Mara leaned closer. "I don't see anyone." I looked again. The window was empty. No woman. No movement. Just black glass reflecting snow. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, because it felt ridiculous standing there with a toothbrush in my hand. But something about that empty window made the hair on my arms lift. "She was just there," I said. "Probably a curtain or reflection." "Yeah, probably." Mara climbed into bed. I stood there a little longer. The courtyard looked ordinary, quiet, even comforting beneath all that snow. But my gut told me something was off. I'd learned too late that danger often wears a familiar shape. Still, I closed the curtains and told myself it was nothing. That night, I woke up around 2:40. Not from a sound exactly. More like from the sudden feeling that someone had said my name in the room. The room was dark except for a stripe of pale light at the bottom of the curtains. Mara slept beside me, breathing softly. The wind had died down, and the quiet after it felt too complete. Then came a sound. Tap, tap, tap. I opened my eyes wider. It came again. Tap, tap, tap. From the window. I lay still, listening. At first, I thought maybe snow or ice was hitting the glass. But the taps were too measured. 3. Pause. 3. I got out of bed slowly, careful not to wake Mara. The carpet was cold under my feet. I pulled the curtain back just an inch. The woman was there again. Across the courtyard. Same window. Same still posture. Only now, the room behind her had a faint light in it. Not electric light. Something warmer. Dim and amber, like a lamp burning behind old curtains. Her face was clearer this time. Not fully. The snow and distance hid the details. But I could tell she was pale. Very pale. Her eyes were dark spots fixed directly on me. My heart sank into my stomach as the curtain slipped from my fingers, and I realized I was standing there in the dark with someone watching me from a wing that was supposed to be closed. Mara stirred. "Ethan," she mumbled. I didn't answer right away. The woman lifted one hand. Slowly. Her fingers touched the inside of the glass. Tap, tap, tap. I stepped back so fast my heel hit the bed frame. Mara sat up. "What's wrong?" "She's there again." "Who?" "The woman." Mara got out of bed, annoyed and sleepy, and pulled the curtain open. The window across the courtyard was dark. Empty. Again. Mara stared for a long moment, then looked at me. "Ethan, I know what I saw. I'm not saying you didn't see something. You think I'm tired. I think we drove through a storm, and you had wine, and this hotel is weird. I had one glass." She sighed and touched my arm. "Come back to bed." I did, but I didn't sleep much. The next morning, the storm had trapped everyone inside. The main road was open but slow. and the hotel lobby had become a waiting room of stranded guests drinking coffee and pretending not to check weather updates every 5 minutes. At breakfast, I asked our server about the West Wing. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with silver hair tied back and a face that looked like it didn't enjoy nonsense. "The closed wing across the courtyard," I said. "Does anyone work in there at night?" Her expression changed just slightly. "No. No maintenance? Security? No. I saw someone in a window." She set down the coffee pot. "Reflection, maybe. That's what my wife said." Mara kicked me lightly under the table. The server looked toward the windows, though from where we sat you couldn't see the courtyard. "That wing has been sealed for years," she said. "Not just closed. Sealed." "Why?" "Water damage. Mold. Structural problems. Take your pick." "Has anyone else ever seen someone there?" She gave me a look, not frightened, careful. Then she said, "Old hotels collect stories. Best not to go looking for them." And she walked away. Mara waited until she was gone, then said, "Please don't become one of those husbands who turns vacation into a ghost hunt." "I'm not ghost hunting. You asked the waitress about sealed wings before coffee. That's fair." She smiled despite herself. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. That afternoon, we wandered the hotel because there wasn't much else to do. Banff outside was all white wind and closed sidewalks. Inside, the hotel had long corridors with patterned carpets, framed photographs, and little sitting rooms where no one sat. It was beautiful in a heavy, old-money way. Eventually, we found the service doors to the West Wing. They were at the end of a quiet hallway behind a decorative rope. 2 dark wooden doors with brass handles. A printed sign said, "Authorized personnel only. No guest access." A chain ran through the handles, secured with a padlock. Mara raised an eyebrow. "Happy now?" I looked at the doors. From behind them came a faint draft of cold air. And something else. A smell. Dust, damp wood, and a trace of something floral, like perfume trapped in old fabric. I leaned closer. Mara said, "Ethan." "What?" "Don't. I'm just looking." "No, you're doing that thing where you pretend you're just looking and then accidentally commit a misdemeanor." I smiled, but it faded quickly, because behind the chained doors, somewhere deep in the closed wing, I heard footsteps. One slow step, then another, then silence. Mara must have heard it too, because her face changed. "Could be staff," she whispered. "You heard that?" She didn't answer. Then a woman's voice spoke from behind the doors. Soft. "Close. Room 317. Mara grabbed my sleeve. Our room was 317. I stepped back. The hallway around us felt suddenly too long, too empty. A door opened somewhere behind us, and both of us jumped. It was just a man in a hotel uniform carrying towels. "You folks lost?" he asked. I looked at the chained doors. "We heard someone in there." His friendly expression disappeared. "No, you didn't." Mara said, "We did." He looked at the doors like he hated them. "That wing's sealed. No one's in there." "The voice said our room number," I said. He looked back at me. For the first time, he seemed really worried. Then he lowered his voice. "Go downstairs. Ask to change rooms." "Why?" "Just do it." "What's in there?" He shook his head. "Don't make this your problem." That was when I should have listened. I mean that. I'm not telling this like I was brave or clever. I was stubborn. I was scared, and I covered that fear with curiosity because curiosity feels less embarrassing. We went to the front desk and asked to change rooms. Paige was there again. She typed into the computer, frowned, and apologized. "Because of the storm, we're fully booked. Some guests can't leave and others arrived early. I can move you tomorrow if the road clears." Mara said, "Is there anything else you can do tonight?" Paige looked at me, then at Mara. "What happened?" I told her about the woman in the window, the knocking, the voice behind the doors. Her face went very still. Then she said the sentence I still remember exactly. "Did she see both of you?" Mara and I looked at each other. "What?" I said. Paige blinked, like she realized she had said too much. "I mean, did you both see her?" "No," Mara said slowly. Only Ethan saw her. Paige nodded once. Keep your curtains closed. That's your advice? I asked. For tonight, yes. Who is she? Paige looked over her shoulder toward the office behind the desk. I'm not supposed to discuss guest stories. This isn't a story. Someone knew our room number. Her voice dropped. Then keep your curtains closed. We did. For a while. That night, Mara wanted to sleep with the TV on. We ordered room service because neither of us wanted to go back downstairs. The storm was still bad, rattling the old windows and howling around the roof like something trying to find a way in. At around 11:30, Mara fell asleep with one hand under her cheek. I stayed awake, sitting in the chair by the desk, staring at the closed curtains. I told myself I wouldn't look. I repeated it in my head. Do not look. Do not look. Then, at exactly midnight, the tapping started. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. It wasn't from the window this time. It came from the wall beside the bed. Tap, tap, tap. Mara stirred but didn't wake. I stood slowly. The tapping moved. Now it came from behind the headboard, then from the floor, then the ceiling. 3 soft knocks at a time, circling the room. It felt like someone moving around us from inside the walls. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling as I fumbled for my phone. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was conspiring against me. I turned on the flashlight. The room looked normal. Too normal. Our suitcase near the closet. Mara's sweater over the chair. 2 empty water glasses on the nightstand. The curtains hanging still. Then the TV turned off. The room went dark except for my phone light. Mara woke up. Ethan? Before I could answer, the curtains opened. Not all the way, just enough to show the window. Across the courtyard, the woman stood in the west wing. But this time she wasn't in the same window. She was in the window directly opposite ours, close enough that I could see her face. She looked young and old at the same time, if that makes sense. Her features were smooth, but her eyes looked exhausted. Her hair was dark, pinned back in an old style. She wore a pale dress buttoned up to her throat, and she was smiling. Not warmly, not cruelly, like she recognized me. Mara screamed, because this time she saw her too. The woman raised one hand and pressed something against the glass. A photograph. Even from across the courtyard, I knew what it showed. Our room. Our bed. Mara and me sleeping. Taken from inside. I grabbed Mara's hand and pulled her toward the door. We didn't pack. Didn't put on coats. I barely got shoes on. We ran into the hallway, and I started banging on the nearest room door like a lunatic. A man opened it, half asleep and angry, until he saw Mara crying. Please, she said. Someone's in our room. Hotel security came. Paige came. A manager came. A man named Lennox with a shaved head and a practiced calm voice. They checked our room. No one was inside. The curtains were open. The TV was off. Nothing missing. No photograph. Lennox listened to us in the hallway, while 2 other guests watched from their doorways. I understand this is upsetting, he said, in a tone that meant he absolutely did not want this upsetting anyone else. But old buildings. Don't say old buildings make noises, I snapped. His jaw tightened. Mara said, we saw her. Paige stood behind him, pale and silent. I pointed down the hall. We want to see that wing. No, Lennox said. Then call the police. His expression flickered, because the storm had made that complicated. The local RCMP detachment could send someone, but it might take time. Roads were bad. It wasn't an emergency in their eyes unless someone was actively in danger. That was the problem. We felt in danger. But try explaining to a dispatcher that the danger is a woman in a sealed hotel wing holding a photograph that disappeared. Lennox moved us to a staff room near the lobby for the rest of the night. It had no view of the courtyard, no old windows, no charm, just a bed, a desk, and a heater that clicked every few minutes. Mara cried quietly until she fell asleep. I sat awake until morning. At dawn, the storm finally weakened. Guests began checking out around 9. plows had cleared enough of the road that people were willing to risk the drive. Mara wanted to leave immediately. I said yes. I meant yes. Then I went to return our original key cards and saw Paige at the front desk alone. She looked exhausted. I need to know, I said. She didn't pretend not to understand. You should leave, she said. We are, but I need to know what that was. Paige stared at the desk. My grandmother worked here, she said quietly, back when the West Wing was still open. What happened? She took a breath. There was a guest, a woman. She stayed in that wing in the winter of 1969. Some people said she was waiting for her husband. Some said she didn't have one. The story changes depending who tells it. What was her name? Elise Ward. The name meant nothing to me then. She was found in her room after a storm, Paige continued. The official version was illness. That's all I know. I watched her face. That's not all. Paige looked toward the office door. My grandmother said Elise kept albums, photos of guests, couples mostly. She would watch them, photograph them, write things about them. She believed certain people were connected to the hotel before they arrived. Connected how? I don't know. You do know. Paige's eyes lifted to mine. She said Elise could tell which couples would come back and which wouldn't, which ones belonged to the hotel. The lobby suddenly felt too warm. What does that mean? Paige swallowed. It means you should take your wife and leave while you still can. That should have been enough. But then she opened a drawer and slid something across the desk. A brass key. Old. Heavy. Not a modern key card. I didn't give you this, she said. I stared at it. What is it? West Wing service stare. Why would you give me that? Because if you leave without knowing, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering. And sometimes wondering is how it follows. I should have pushed it back. Instead, I took it. I told Mara I needed 10 minutes to check out properly. It was the worst lie I've ever told her, and she knew it immediately. Ethan, she said, standing near the lobby fireplace in her coat. No, I'll be quick. No, we leave now. I just need to see if there's proof. Proof for who? We know what happened, but I didn't know, and that was the hook in me. I told her to wait in the lobby. She called me a selfish idiot, which was fair, and then said if I wasn't back in 10 minutes, she was finding security. I went. The service stair was behind a staff door near the kitchen. The key worked with a reluctant scrape. The stairwell beyond was dark and freezing, colder than the rest of the hotel. Dust coated the steps. My phone flashlight cut through the dark in a thin white beam. At the top, another door waited. It was chained from the other side, but loose enough that I could squeeze through after forcing one side open. The West Wing smelled like rot, dust, old carpet, and that faint floral perfume. The hallway stretched ahead, long and narrow, with peeling wallpaper and doors on both sides. Sheets covered old furniture along the walls. The carpet was soft with dust. My footsteps left dark marks behind me. The windows facing the courtyard were to my right. One by one, I passed them. From there, I could see our room across the way. The curtains were open, the bed unmade, the place where I had stood looking out. That alone made me feel exposed, like I was watching myself from a predator's hiding place. Halfway down the hall, I found the room. I knew it before I saw the number. 317 across the courtyard had a direct line of sight to this room. Its door was slightly open. The number on the door was 421. I pushed it in. Inside was a hotel room preserved under dust. Old bed frame, dresser, vanity, curtains stiff with age. The walls were covered in photographs. Hundreds of them, maybe more. They had been pinned, taped, framed, stacked on furniture. Black and white photos, color photos, Polaroids, printed digital pictures. Couples in the lobby. Couples dining. Couples standing in snow outside. Couples asleep in rooms. Some looked decades old. Some were recent. I moved closer, horror settling over me in slow layers. There were notes beneath the pictures. Arrived during first storm. Asked for room with view. Husband saw me first. Wife heard knocking second night. Left before dawn. Returned 14 years later alone. My mouth went dry. This was not random. This was a record, a collection. On the vanity sat several photo albums. The covers were cracked, the pages yellowing. I opened one with shaking hands. Inside were pictures of guests from different years, carefully labeled. Names, dates, room numbers. Some pages had red thread connecting faces. Some had small notes in the margins. Not yet. Will return. One came alone. She sees me. Do not open door. Then I found a page dated 6 years before our trip. Calgary. I stopped. The photo showed a street corner downtown. People walking past a coffee shop. Cars parked along the curb. In the background, standing outside the coffee shop, were me and Mara. Younger. Not much younger, but enough. Mara's hair was shorter. I was wearing the blue jacket I lost years ago. We were laughing at something, both holding paper cups. I knew the day immediately. It was one of our first dates. We had never been to that hotel. We had never been to Banff together. We didn't even know we would get married. But someone had photographed us. Under the picture, in neat handwriting, were the words, "They will come in winter." The room tilted around me. I backed away from the vanity and bumped into the bed. That was when I noticed the closet door. It was open. Inside hung a pale dress buttoned to the throat. The same dress. Below it, on the floor, was a camera. Not old. A modern digital camera. Its little red light blinked. Recording. Behind me, the door clicked shut. My heart sank into my stomach as the door clicked shut behind me, and I realized I was completely alone. Someone was watching, and I had no way out. I spun around and grabbed the handle. Locked. From the other side of the room, a woman's voice whispered, "Ethan." I turned slowly. The window was empty. The walls were still covered in photos. Nothing moved. Then came a sound from behind the closet door. Breathing. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just someone standing in the dark, breathing through their nose. I grabbed the camera from the floor and threw it at the window. The glass cracked but didn't break. The closet door moved inward by an inch. I kicked the main door as hard as I could. Once. Twice. Pain shot up my leg. The whisper came again. Not from the closet this time. From directly beside my ear. "She saw you first." I screamed and slammed my shoulder into the door. The frame gave slightly. I hit it again. Again. On the fourth hit, the old lock splintered, and I fell into the hallway. I didn't look back. I ran. Down the dust-choked corridor, through the loose-chained door, down the service stairs so fast I nearly fell twice. Behind me, footsteps followed. Not running. Walking. Calm. Certain. I burst through the staff door near the kitchen and almost crashed into Lennox and a security guard. Mara was with them. Her face went white when she saw me. What happened? I couldn't answer. I just said, "We have to leave." Lennox looked past me at the open staff door. "What did you do?" From inside the stairwell, somewhere above us, came 3 soft taps. Tap, tap, tap. Lennox stopped breathing. The security guard whispered, "Oh no." That was all I needed. Mara grabbed my hand, and we ran through the lobby, past guests, past Paige, past the fireplace, out into the freezing morning. We got in the car and drove. I don't remember checking out. I don't remember loading the bags. I only remember Mara crying in the passenger seat, and me gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers cramped. For the first hour, neither of us spoke. The mountains stood around us in cold silence. Snow blew across the road in thin white snakes. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I expected to see a woman in a pale dress sitting in the back seat. There was no one, but near Canmore, Mara finally said, "You lied to me." I said, "I know. You left me alone after everything." "I know." Her voice broke. "What did you find?" I told her. Not all at once. Piece by piece. The room. The photos. The album. The picture of us in Calgary. She didn't speak for a long time after that. Then she said, "Pull over." I did. She got out and threw up in the snow. We did not stay together much longer. That sounds cold, but it's the truth. Some things don't bring people closer. Some things expose every fracture already there. Mara couldn't forgive me for going into that wing. I couldn't forgive myself either. We tried for 6 months, but every hotel, every vacation plan, every old building became a silent accusation. We divorced the following year. I still think about her all the time. Not in a romantic way, exactly. More like wondering whether she sleeps with the curtains closed, whether she checks windows across courtyards, whether she hears tapping when she's half asleep. I know I do. A few years after it happened, I tried to find information about Elise Ward. There was almost nothing. A local archive had one mention of a woman by that name staying at a Banff hotel in the late 60s. No obituary I could confirm. No clear record. Just a few hotel photographs from the era, group shots in the lobby and dining room. In one photo I saw her, standing near the back, pale dress, dark hair, eyes fixed on the camera. Behind her, half hidden by a column, were photo albums stacked on a table. I closed my laptop and didn't research again. The hotel never contacted us. No apology, no explanation. When I called months later and asked about items left behind, they claimed there had been no incident report under my name. Paige no longer worked there. Lennox was unavailable. The West Wing, according to the person on the phone, was still closed for renovation. I asked if room 421 existed. The line went quiet, then they hung up. Sometimes I think Paige knew exactly what would happen if I went in there. Sometimes I think she wanted someone else to see the room, so she didn't have to carry it alone. Sometimes I wonder if she was ever really trying to help us leave. That's the problem with something like this. It doesn't end cleanly. It leaves hooks everywhere. Even after escaping, even with the safety of the highway behind us, a small, cold part of me couldn't stop replaying the face I'd seen through the window. The calm, empty eyes that didn't blink. I don't stay in old hotels anymore. I don't book rooms with courtyard views. I don't sleep with curtains open, even on upper floors. And if I ever check into a place and the front desk circles a section on the map and tells me that wing is closed, I believe them. Because I've learned there are places that don't just remember people. They wait for them. And sometimes, long before you arrive, long before you pack a bag or book a room, or even meet the person you'll bring with you, something has already taken your picture. Something has already written your name down. Something is standing in a dark window, watching the snow fall, waiting for the night you finally look back. Story 4. Have you ever heard a sound that felt like it was meant only for you? Not loud, exactly. Not close. Just personal. Like the world went quiet around it, and for a few seconds, everything inside you leaned toward that sound before your common sense could stop you. That was how the foghorn sounded. It came at 3 o'clock in the morning, every night, from the old lighthouse on the cliffs outside our village. The same lighthouse that had been abandoned since before I was born. No power, no keeper, no working horn. Nothing up there but broken glass, rust, gull nests, and salt wind. But every night, at exactly 3 o'clock, it called. One long, low note rolling in from the fog. And after a while, people started following it. My name is Callum Doyle. I was 32 when this happened, living in a fishing village on the northeast coast of Newfoundland. I'm not going to say the real name of the place, partly because there are still people there who would hate me for telling this, and partly because if you go looking for it, you might find it. That sounds dramatic, I know. I used to hate stories that started like that, but after what happened, I understand why some places should stay unnamed. The village was small enough that everybody knew when you bought new tires, got into a fight with your wife, or forgot to put your garbage bins out. There was one main road, a church with peeling white paint, a convenience store that sold coffee too weak to be called coffee, and a little harbor crowded with fishing boats that looked half asleep when the tide was low. My father fished cod before the rules changed. My grandfather did too. I grew up around boats, rope, diesel, wet gloves, and men who could read weather by the ache in their knees. By the time I was 20, I had my own small boat with my cousin Brendan, and by 32, I knew the coast well enough to respect it. Not love it, respect it. The sea gives, but it also keeps count. My life then was ordinary. Hard, but ordinary. I lived alone in a small blue house near the harbor, the kind with storm windows that rattled no matter how much you sealed them. My mother lived 3 streets up. My younger sister had moved to St. John's and always told me I should leave too. I never did. I liked the routine. Up before sunrise, check the weather, coffee from May's store, down to the wharf, out if the water allowed it, back by afternoon, supper, radio, sleep. That was my life. Quiet, repetitive, safe in the way boring things can feel safe. The lighthouse stood about a mile north of the village, past a gravel road and a stretch of cliffs locals called Black Point. It had been built long before my time, back when ships still depended on that light to get around the rocks. By the time I was a kid, it was already shut down. The keeper's house beside it had collapsed on one side, and the tower leaned slightly like it was tired of standing. We were warned not to go there, not because of ghosts, because the cliffs were unstable and teenagers are stupid. There were stories, of course. Every old place has stories. People said you could hear boots inside the tower on foggy nights. They said the old keeper lost his son to the water and kept the horn blowing for 3 days after the boy vanished, hoping he'd follow the sound home. But people say a lot of things when the wind is loud and the beer is cheap. I never believed any of it. The first time I heard the horn, I was in bed. It was late October, the season when Newfoundland starts feeling less like a place and more like a warning. Rain had been hitting the windows all evening. Not hard, just steady. The kind of rain that makes the whole house smell damp no matter what you do. I woke up at 2:58 for no reason. That happens sometimes. You wake up and stare into the dark, not sure if a noise woke you or a dream. I lay there listening to the wind push against the siding. Then, at exactly 3 o'clock, the horn sounded. Low, deep, long enough that I felt it in my chest. It came from the north, from Black Point. I sat up slowly. For a few seconds, I thought maybe it was a ship offshore. Fog signals still happen, and sound can carry strangely over water. But this was not out at sea. I knew the direction too well. It was from the lighthouse. The sound faded, and the house settled back into silence. I checked my phone. 3:01 a.m. I told myself it was nothing. A boat, a buoy, some kind of equipment from the Coast Guard. Something ordinary that only seemed strange because it was dark and I was half asleep. In the morning, I mentioned it to Brendan. We were loading gear at the wharf, both of us in heavy jackets, breath showing in the air. The sky was low and gray, and gulls were screaming over the bait shed. "You hear a horn last night?" I asked. Brendan didn't look up from coiling rope. "What kind?" "Foghorn." He paused. "What time?" 3. Now he looked at me. His face changed just a little. "You heard it too?" That was the first moment I felt uneasy. Not scared, just aware that the world had shifted half an inch. "Where'd it come from?" I asked. He shrugged too quickly. "Sound carries." "Brendan." He tied off the rope and looked toward the cliffs. "Old lighthouse," he said. We both stared at Black Point. From the harbor, you could just barely see the top of the tower against the sky, pale and thin like a finger bone. "That place hasn't had power in decades," I said. "I know. So maybe it wasn't that." But neither of us believed that. For the next 3 nights, the horn sounded at 3 o'clock. One long call. Never more. Never less. By the 4th morning, people were talking. May at the store said it woke her dog. Father Quinn said he heard it from the rectory and thought a ship was in trouble. Old Mrs. Hanrahan said she slept through it, then immediately claimed she'd been hearing it for years, because she was the kind of person who needed to know things first even when she didn't. Most people treated it like a curiosity, a strange local thing, something to talk about over coffee. Someone said maybe kids had rigged speakers up there. Someone else said maybe the Coast Guard had reactivated something and forgotten to tell anyone. Brendan said maybe we should all mind our business. That was Brendan. He was my cousin, but more like a brother. We were the same age, grew up 2 houses apart, and had nearly drowned together twice before we were 20. He was steady in bad weather, useless at paperwork, and better with people than me. If he was worried, he usually hid it behind sarcasm. But after the horn started, he got quiet. On the fifth night, I stayed awake to hear it. I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, drinking tea I didn't want, watching the clock on the stove. Outside, fog pressed against the windows so thick the glass looked painted gray. The street light near my driveway was just a soft orange blur. At 2:59, everything went still. The wind stopped. The rain stopped. Even the old fridge seemed to pause. Then the horn came, long and low, rolling through the village like something breathing under the earth. I stood without meaning to. That scared me more than the sound. My body moved before I decided to move. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. The click sounded too loud in the kitchen. My hand was already on the knob when I caught myself. I stepped back, breathing hard. "What are you doing?" I whispered. Outside, the fog swirled past the porch. For 1 second, through the window, I thought I saw someone standing in the road. A shape, human height, facing my house. Then the fog shifted, and it was gone. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the whisper of footsteps from the porch made me freeze, every nerve screaming that I was not imagining this. 3 slow steps crossed the boards outside my front door. Then nothing. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, there were wet footprints on my porch. Bare footprints, large, facing the door. No tracks leading up to the porch. No tracks leading away. Just 2 pale, wet prints on the wood, like someone had stood there after walking out of the sea. I called Brendan. He came over 10 minutes later, hair still wet from the shower, jacket half zipped. He stared at the footprints for a long time. "Maybe someone drunk," he said. "Barefoot? In October?" He didn't answer. I said, "Have you gone up to the lighthouse?" "No." The way he said it told me he was lying. "Brendan." He sighed and rubbed his eyes. "I went yesterday afternoon." "Why?" "To see if someone was messing around." "And?" He looked toward the road, then back at me. "The door was open." "To the tower?" "Yeah. It's always locked." "It was open." "What was inside?" He hesitated. "Nothing much. Trash. Old bird nests. Rusted stairs." "You went up?" "Halfway." "Why only halfway?" "Because I heard someone above me." The words sat between us in the cold air. I asked, "Who?" "I don't know." "Footsteps. Slow. Like someone coming down." "Did you see anyone?" "No." "What did you do?" "What do you think I did?" "I left." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. That afternoon, the first person disappeared. His name was Martin Pike. He was 57, a widower, lived near the church, and walked every morning down to the harbor with a thermos, even though he hadn't worked on a boat in 10 years. He was quiet, harmless, the kind of man people forgot to include, but always expected to see. When he didn't show up at May's store, people noticed. His front door was unlocked. His bed was slept in. His boots were by the mat. But his raincoat was gone. And on the kitchen table, his daughter found a note. "Gone to see who's calling." That was all. Search parties went out before noon. The RCMP came from the next town. Volunteers checked sheds, roadsides, wooded paths. Brendan and I joined the group that went toward Black Point. The fog had lifted a little, but the cliffs were still slick from rain, and the grass bent flat in the wind. The lighthouse looked worse up close than I remembered. White paint stripped by salt, windows broken, door hanging slightly open. I stood at the base of it, looking up. A smell came from inside. Not rot exactly, more like low tide and old metal. One of the officers, a young woman named Sergeant LeBlanc, told us not to enter. She and another officer checked the tower, while the rest of us spread out around the cliff path. They found Martin's raincoat near the edge. No body. No sign he had slipped, though with cliffs like those, signs don't always matter. One wrong step, one patch of wet grass, and the ocean takes the evidence. By evening, everyone was saying the same thing in different ways. Poor Martin. Fog got him turned around. Shouldn't have gone out alone. Terrible thing. People need explanations quickly. Even bad ones. Especially bad ones. That night, every light in the village seemed to stay on. At 3 o'clock, the horn sounded again. And this time, after it faded, I heard a voice outside my window. Callum. Soft. Wet. Familiar. I sat up in bed, heart punching against my ribs. Callum, it said again. It was Martin Pike's voice. I knew it immediately. He had a slow way of saying my name, stretching the first syllable like he was deciding whether to finish the word. I didn't move. My bedroom window faced the street. The curtains were closed, but moonlight and fog made them glow faintly. A shadow stood behind them, close to the glass. I could see the outline of a head and shoulders. Cold out here, Martin's voice said. I grabbed my phone. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. The shadow leaned closer to the window. The glass fogged from the outside in a small oval like breath. Open up, boy. I called Brendan. He answered instantly. You hear it too, he whispered. There's someone outside my window. Don't open anything. It sounds like Martin. Brendan went quiet. Then he said, That's not Martin. A soft tapping began on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Not hard. Patient. Like whoever stood there had all night. I stayed on the phone with Brendan until sunrise. When the light came, the shadow was gone. There were wet handprints on the outside of my bedroom window. The next morning, I called Sergeant LeBlanc. She came by around 10, practical and tired-looking, with a notebook in one hand and windburn on her cheeks. I showed her the prints. By then they were drying, fading into streaks on the glass. She asked if I had enemies. I almost laughed. In this town, everybody has enemies, but nobody stands barefoot outside windows pretending to be missing men. She looked at me carefully. Pretending. I told her about the voice. She wrote it down, but I could tell she didn't know where to put it in her mind. Sound carries strangely here, she said. That's what everyone keeps saying. I'm not dismissing you. You kind of are. She closed the notebook. Mr. Doyle, I believe you heard something. But Martin Pike is missing, and until we know otherwise, we have to treat this like a search and rescue situation. Then search the lighthouse again. We did. Search it at 3. She didn't answer. That afternoon, Brendan came by with boards and screws. What's this? I asked. Window covers. You're joking. No. We boarded over my bedroom window from the inside. Then the kitchen window. Then the back door window. It should have made me feel safer. Instead, the house felt smaller, like I was preparing for a storm that knew my name. For 2 nights, nobody disappeared. The horn still called at 3 o'clock, but no one followed it. Maybe people were too scared. Maybe the police presence helped. Maybe whatever was out there was waiting. Then Mrs. Hanrahan vanished. She was 81 and mean enough that half the village believed she'd outlive us all out of spite. Her grandson found her front door wide open before breakfast. Her slippers were in the road. Her coat was gone. On her kitchen counter was a small puddle of seawater. No note. But her landline had one voicemail, left at 3:04 a.m. The police never released it. Her grandson played it for Brendan and me because he was shaking and didn't know what else to do. At first, there was only wind. Then the foghorn far away. Then Mrs. Hanrahan's voice, but not from the phone. From somewhere in the room with her. She said, Patrick? Patrick was her husband. He had drowned 30 years earlier when his boat went down in a sudden storm. The recording crackled. Then a man's voice answered. Come on, Mary. I've been waiting. I will never forget the sound Mrs. Hanrahan made after that. Not a scream. Something worse. Hope. She said, Oh, Pat. Then the line went dead. That changed the village. Curiosity became fear. People stopped joking at May's store. Kids were kept home from school for a few days, even though nobody said why. Men who had spent their whole lives mocking ghost stories started locking doors at sunset. The church filled for evening prayer. Even people who hadn't been inside since Christmas came and sat with pale faces, listening to the wind press against the windows. Father Quinn told everyone not to give in to fear. Then, during the closing hymn, the church bell rang once. By itself. Everyone froze. Father Quinn stared toward the back of the church. The bell rope hung still. A smell moved through the room. Salt water, cold weeds. The inside of a bait bucket left too long in the sun. Then, from outside the church doors, someone began to knock. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Pause. Nobody moved. A woman in the pew behind me started crying quietly. Then a voice called through the door. Mary? Mrs. Hanrahan's grandson stood so fast the pew creaked. I grabbed his arm. Don't. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. That's Nan. No. The knock came again. 3 times. Mary's cold, the voice said. It sounded like Mrs. Hanrahan, but wrong. Like her voice was being spoken through water. Father Quinn walked slowly down the aisle. I wanted to tell him not to, but he was already lifting one hand toward the door. The church went silent. He opened it. There was nobody outside, only fog. Thick, white fog pressed right up against the entrance, so dense the steps disappeared after the first one. Then the foghorn sounded, not from the cliffs, from inside the fog just beyond the door. The sound hit us so hard people covered their ears. Father Quinn staggered backward. The candles along the altar went out all at once. People panicked, not screaming like in movies. Real panic is uglier. People bumping into each other, someone falling, someone praying too loudly, someone saying, "Close the door, close the door, close the door," over and over. I pushed forward with Brendan and slammed the church doors shut. For a second, through the narrow crack before the latch caught, I saw figures in the fog. Not one, many, standing in the churchyard, facing us. Then the door closed. That night, nobody slept. The RCMP blocked the road to Black Point the next day, though I'm not sure what they thought that would do. They put up barriers and warning signs, like the problem was a dangerous trail and not voices calling dead husbands to their wives. Sergeant LeBlanc came to my house in the afternoon. She looked different, less official somehow, more human. "You were right," she said. I didn't say anything. She looked at the boards over my windows. "You said the horn is from the lighthouse." "It sounds like it." We checked again this morning. There is no mechanism left inside that could make that sound. Nothing. The old horn was removed years ago. "Then what's making it?" She rubbed her forehead. "I don't know." That was the first honest answer anyone had given me. I asked, "Do you have family here?" She nodded. "My brother, my niece." "Anyone lost at sea?" Her face tightened. "My father." "Then don't go outside at 3. She looked at me for a long moment. I wasn't planning to, but plans don't mean much when grief starts speaking in a familiar voice. The turning point came the following night. Brendan stayed at my place. We had decided neither of us should be alone. We pushed my kitchen table against the front door and kept every light on. He brought a hunting rifle, though neither of us said out loud how useless it felt. At 2:45, the fog rolled in. You could hear it before you saw it. That sounds strange, but it's true. The world outside became muffled. The harbor bell disappeared. The wind dropped. Even the rain softened, like the village had been wrapped in wool. At 2:58, my power went out. The house dropped into darkness. Brendan whispered, "Don't move." I'm not. The only light came from my phone on the table. 2:59. Something scraped along the front porch. Slow, dragging. Then the foghorn sounded. Inside my chest. Inside the walls. The whole house seemed to vibrate with it. Brendan's face looked pale in the phone light. Then someone knocked on the front door. 3 times. Pause. 3 times. A voice said, "Bren." Brendan closed his eyes. I knew that voice too. His older brother Sean. Sean had gone overboard when we were 19. A rogue wave, bad timing, no body recovered. Brendan never talked about it unless he was drunk, and even then only in fragments. "Bren," the voice said again. "Open up." Brendan's hand tightened around the rifle. I said, "That's not him." His jaw shook. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." "You don't." The voice outside softened. "I'm tired, buddy. Just let me in." I could see Brendan breaking. Not from stupidity, from love. That's what made it cruel. It didn't call strangers. It didn't growl or threaten. It used the voices people had been waiting years to hear again. Brendan moved toward the door. I stepped in front of him. He shoved me. Not hard at first, but enough to knock me into the counter. "Move," he said. "No." His eyes were wet. "That's my brother. Your brother is gone." He hit me then. A quick, desperate punch to the side of my face. Not full strength, but enough that I saw sparks. I fell against the table, and Brendan grabbed the edge to pull it away from the door. My heart sank into my stomach as the door clicked under his hand, and I realized I was completely alone in stopping him. Someone was watching from the other side, and Brendan had no way out if I failed. I tackled him. We crashed into the table, knocking my phone to the floor. The rifle slid under a chair. Brendan cursed and fought like an animal, trying to crawl toward the door while his brother's voice pleaded from outside. "Bren, please. It's cold." I pinned his arm and shouted in his face. "Sean wouldn't ask you to die." That stopped him. For 1 second, he froze. Then something outside hit the door. Hard. The whole frame shook. The table jumped back an inch. Another hit. The boards over the kitchen window creaked. A wet hand slapped against the glass behind the plywood. Then another. Then another. All around the house, hands began tapping. Windows. Door. Walls. Soft at first, then harder. Dozens of them. The house filled with voices. Martin Pike asking to come in. Mrs. Hanrahan calling for Patrick. Sean whispering Brendan's name. Other voices too. People I didn't know. Men, women, children. Some crying. Some laughing. Some just breathing wetly against the walls. The front door began to open inward. Not much. Just enough for fog to push through the crack. And behind the fog, I saw fingers curl around the doorframe. They were pale, swollen, and slick with seawater. Brendan screamed. I grabbed the rifle, not because I thought shooting would help, but because it was something solid. I fired once into the floor near the door. The sound was deafening in the little house. The voices stopped. For half a second, everything went silent. Then from outside, Sean's voice said, calm and close, "That wasn't very kind." The door burst open. Fog poured into the house like water. Brendan and I ran for the back. The kitchen window board cracked inward as something pressed against it. I could hear wood splintering. I could smell the ocean, not fresh ocean air, but deep water. Cold, dark bottom of the sea water. I fumbled with the back door lock, my fingers numb and clumsy. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the keys. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was conspiring against me. The key slipped. Brendan shoved me aside and kicked the door near the latch. Once. Twice. It flew open. We ran into the backyard. The fog was so thick I could barely see my own hands. Somewhere behind us, things moved inside my house. Chairs scraping. Wet feet on linoleum. Voices murmuring like a crowd at a funeral. We ran toward the harbor because it was the only direction we knew by instinct. Bad choice. The horn sounded again. This time, it came from ahead of us. We stumbled to a stop near the road. Through the fog, a lantern appeared. Then another. Then a line of them. People stood in the street between us and the harbor. Not people. Shapes. Some looked almost normal at first. Coats hanging heavy. Hair plastered to faces. Heads bowed. But others were wrong in small ways my mind didn't want to understand. Too still. Too pale. Clothes from different years. A woman in a dress like old photographs. A boy holding a toy boat against his chest. A man with one boot missing. Their faces were turned toward us. Waiting. Brendan whispered, "Sean?" A figure stepped forward. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Wearing a red oilskin jacket. Sean's jacket. Brendan made a sound like all the air had been punched out of him. The figure lifted its head. I won't describe the face too much. I don't need to. I'll only say it was familiar enough to hurt him and wrong enough to save him. Brendan backed away. "That's not him," he whispered. The figure smiled. Its mouth was too dark. Then, from behind us, Martin Pike's voice said, "Plenty of room." We ran sideways through a neighbor's yard, crashing through a clothesline, slipping on wet grass. The foghorn blasted again, and I felt the pull of it this time. Not emotional, physical, like a hook behind my ribs. For one horrible second, I wanted to stop. I wanted to walk to the cliffs. I wanted to see who was calling. That is the part one still struggled to explain. It was not only fear, it was longing. The sound made you feel like everything you had ever lost was waiting just beyond the fog, and all you had to do was go to it. Brendan grabbed my sleeve and dragged me hard enough to tear it. "Don't listen," he shouted. We reached May's store. The lights were on inside. People had gathered there, maybe 20 of them, faces pale through the windows. Someone saw us and opened the door just wide enough to pull us in. The door slammed shut behind us. Inside, it smelled like coffee, wet wool, and fear. Sergeant LeBlanc was there with 2 officers. Father Quinn, several families. Everyone talking at once in low, panicked voices. Then someone said, "Where's Owen?" Owen was May's nephew, 17, tall and quiet, always helping unload deliveries. May turned in a circle. He was just here. At the back of the store, the emergency exit was open. Fog curled along the floor. May screamed his name and started toward it, but Sergeant LeBlanc grabbed her. Outside, faintly, Owen's voice called, "Aunt May?" The foghorn answered. May collapsed crying. Nobody went after him. That was the worst thing about that night. Not the figures, not the voices. The worst thing was learning there comes a point where survival looks exactly like cowardice. We stayed in the store until dawn. The sounds continued for hours. Knocking, voices, the horn at intervals, sometimes close, sometimes distant, always at the edge of thought. A few times, someone inside would suddenly stand and walk toward a door like they were sleepwalking. We had to hold them down until the pull passed. At sunrise, the fog lifted. My house was wrecked inside. Wet footprints everywhere. Furniture overturned. The front door hanging from one hinge. No bodies. No clear evidence that anything had been there except seawater pooled across the floor and a child's handprint on the kitchen wall, small and gray with salt. Owen was gone. 3 others too. A retired teacher named Helen Marsh. A fisherman named Eli Cross. Sergeant LeBlanc's younger brother, Thomas. He had left her a voicemail at 4:12 a.m. She never let anyone hear it. By noon, outside authorities arrived. More police. Search teams, emergency officials, people with clipboards and radios who looked at our faces and realized very quickly that normal questions weren't going to work. The official version became weather-related disappearances during a severe coastal fog event. That is what they called it, a severe coastal fog event. They searched the cliffs for days. They found Owen's left shoe near Black Point. They found Helen Marsh's scarf tied around the railing of the lighthouse stairs. They found Eli Cross's cap floating in a tide pool. They found nothing of Thomas. The lighthouse was sealed after that. Concrete barriers, heavy locks, warning signs. The road washed out in a storm that winter and was never properly repaired. People left the village. Not all at once. That would have made too much sense. They left slowly. A family after Christmas, another in the spring. May sold the store to a cousin and moved inland. Sergeant LeBlanc transferred away. Father Quinn retired early. Brendan lasted 6 months. Then he moved to Alberta and stopped answering calls for a while. I stayed longer than I should have. I told myself I had work, a house, my mother, responsibilities. Truth was, I was waiting. For what? I don't know. Proof maybe. Closure. Some sign that the horn had stopped for good. It didn't. Not every night anymore. But sometimes. Always at 3 o'clock. Always when the fog came in. After the disappearances, people stopped going outside when it sounded. Doors stayed locked. Windows stayed covered. Radios played loud. Some families slept in shifts. Some left town whenever the forecast mentioned fog. My mother moved in with me for a while because she didn't want to be alone at night. She had lost my father to cancer, not the sea, and I thought that made her safer. Then one night in March, the horn sounded, and my father's voice called from the road. "Annie." My mother stood up from the kitchen table, so fast her chair fell. I grabbed her before she reached the door. She fought me. My sweet, tired mother fought like she hated me. She clawed at my arms and sobbed my father's name. Outside, he kept calling, patient and loving. "Annie, come see. It doesn't hurt anymore." I held her on the kitchen floor until the sun came up. The next week, I moved us both to St. John's. I sold the house for almost nothing to a man from away who wanted a summer place. I warned him. Not directly, because how do you say something like that and keep a straight face? But I told him the fog was dangerous. I told him not to go near Black Point. I told him if he heard anything at 3 o'clock in the morning, he should cover his ears and stay inside. He smiled politely. People always smile before they understand. That was 9 years ago. My mother passed away 2 winters back, peacefully, in a hospital bed with my sister and me beside her. I'm grateful for that, more grateful than I can explain. Brendan and I talk again. He has a wife now, 2 kids, a job far from the ocean. He says he doesn't dream about Sean anymore, but I don't believe him. Some wounds don't heal. They just learn manners. I live in a small apartment now. 3rd floor. No view of the water. That was deliberate. I don't fish anymore. I don't even like walking near harbors. Most days, I can make myself seem normal. I go to work, buy groceries, answer messages, laugh when people expect me to. But I still check the weather every night before bed. Not for rain, not for wind, for fog. And if there's fog in the forecast, I stay awake. You might think distance would make a difference. It does not. Last October, on the anniversary of Martin Pike's disappearance, I woke up at 2:58 a.m. My room was dark. My window was closed. Outside, the city was quiet in that late-night way cities get, when even traffic seems embarrassed to make noise. At 3 o'clock, I heard it. Faint. Far away. Impossible. One long, low foghorn. I sat up in bed, already sweating. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it was a truck, a ship in the harbor, a dream. Then my phone lit up. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang until it stopped. A voicemail appeared. I stared at it for almost 10 minutes before pressing play. At first, there was only static, then waves, then Brendan's voice. But Brendan was alive. That was what made my blood turn cold. His voice whispered, "Callum, don't come looking." The message ended. I called him immediately. He answered on the second ring, groggy and annoyed. "What? Are you okay? What? Are you home?" "Yeah." "Why?" I didn't know what to say. Behind his voice, faintly, I heard wind. Then, far away on his end of the line, the foghorn sounded. Brendan went silent. I said his name. He didn't answer. Then he whispered, "I hear Sean outside." The call dropped. I called back 27 times. No answer. The RCMP in his area found him at sunrise, sitting in his truck in his driveway, doors locked, windows fogged from the inside. He was alive, barely responsive, wouldn't speak for 2 days. When he finally called me, his voice sounded hollow. He said there had been wet footprints around the truck, bare feet, all sizes, circling it. He said something had stood outside the driver's side window until morning, wearing Sean's jacket. He moved again after that, farther inland. He won't tell me where. I don't blame him. I'm telling you this because people make old warnings sound silly. Don't go out in the fog. Don't follow voices at night. Don't answer when the dead call your name. They sound like stories made to scare children. They are not. They are instructions. The foghorn was never calling us to the sea. That was what we got wrong at first. It was calling the sea back to us, calling back everyone it had taken, or something wearing them, something that learned their voices in the dark water and came home hungry for company. And hunger doesn't always look like teeth. Sometimes it looks like your brother at the door. Sometimes it sounds like your mother's husband asking to come in. Sometimes it is patient enough to wait years. So if you ever find yourself in a coastal town where the fog rolls in too thick and too fast, and an old horn sounds at 3 o'clock in the morning from a lighthouse everyone swears is abandoned, don't go outside. Don't look through the window. Don't answer the voice calling from the road. no matter how much you love the person it sounds like. Because the dead may know your name, but whatever is calling through them knows something worse. It knows who you miss, and it knows exactly how long you'll stand at the door before grief convinces you to open it. Story 5. The first time I saw the lights, I told myself they were headlights. That was the easiest explanation. And when you're standing at a kitchen window in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but black prairie around you, you will take the easiest explanation if it lets you sleep. Cars make sense. People driving too late make sense. Farmers checking fences, teenagers messing around, somebody lost on a back road, all of that makes sense. But by the fourth night, when those same lights had crossed the same empty field and stopped closer to our house than they had the night before, I knew I was lying to myself. And by the last night, when I saw what was carrying them, I understood why my uncle had left that farmhouse to us for free. Nobody gives away land unless the land has already taken something from them. My name is Aaron. I was 17 when this happened, and at the time my family lived in Regina, Saskatchewan. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable enough. My dad worked for a tire supply company, my mom worked part-time at a dental office, and my younger sister, Ellie, was 13 and going through that phase where she acted like every family conversation was an interruption to her very serious life. We were normal. Painfully normal, honestly. We lived in a split-level house on a quiet street with a basketball hoop in the driveway and a freezer in the basement full of Perigis and frozen pizzas. My dad mowed the lawn every Saturday. My mom listened to crime podcasts while cleaning. I worked weekends at a grocery store and spent most of my free time driving around with friends, pretending there was something to do. Then my mom's uncle died. His name was Victor, though we always called him Uncle Vic. I only met him 3 or 4 times when I was younger. He was one of those older relatives who existed mostly in stories. My mom said he had always been strange but harmless. He lived alone on a farm outside a tiny town called Bracken, which was about 2 hours west of Regina, depending on weather and how brave you were with gravel roads. He had no wife, no kids, no close family except my mom. So when he died, the farmhouse and surrounding land went to her. At first, my parents talked about selling it. That made the most sense. We weren't farmers. My dad could barely keep tomatoes alive in the backyard. The property had been neglected for years, and from what little we knew, it was too isolated to be useful to anyone except maybe a neighboring farmer who wanted the land. But then my dad lost his job. It happened fast. One day he was complaining about a new regional manager, and 2 weeks later he was sitting at the kitchen table in the middle of the afternoon, staring at his coffee like it had insulted him. Money got tight, not desperate, but tight enough that I heard my parents whispering at night. The mortgage, bills, insurance, my sister's dental work, my university applications, everything became a number. That's when the farmhouse stopped being something to sell and became something to use. My mom had this idea that we could move there temporarily, fix it up, maybe turn it into an Airbnb someday, or sell it for more once it looked decent. My dad hated the idea at first, but he hated job hunting more. Eventually, he convinced himself the move would be good for us. Fresh air, he said. Space. No rent. No mortgage for a while. Ellie cried for 2 days. I acted like I didn't care, but I did. I was angry in that quiet teenage way where you don't say much, but every sigh is meant to punish the room. I was leaving my friends, my job, my normal life, all because some uncle I barely knew had died in a house nobody wanted. We drove out there in early September. The prairie was beautiful at first. That's something people don't always understand if they haven't spent time in Saskatchewan. They think flat means boring. It isn't. The sky feels enormous. The fields roll just enough to catch the light differently. In the late afternoon, everything turns gold and blue and endless. But after a while, endless starts to feel less beautiful. It starts to feel like there is nowhere to hide. The farmhouse sat at the end of a long dirt approach off an unmarked grid road. It was 2 stories, white paint peeling, with a sagging front porch and a red barn about 50 yards behind it. There were no other houses close enough to see. Just fields on every side, a few lines of trees, and a windbreak of poplars leaning around the yard like tired guards. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not real silence. There was wind, always wind, moving through dry grass and rattling loose metal on the barn. But there were no cars, no dogs barking, no neighbor mowing, no voices. The kind of quiet that makes every small sound feel like it has been waiting for you. My dad put the truck in park and tried to sound cheerful. "Well," he said, "it's got character." Ellie stared at the house and said, "It looks like where people go missing." My mom gave her a look. "Ellie." "What?" "It does." I almost laughed because she was right. Inside, the farmhouse smelled like dust, old wood, and something faintly sweet, like apples rotting in a cellar. Most of Uncle Vic's furniture was still there. Brown couch, heavy kitchen table, lace curtains yellowed from age, a wall calendar from 5 years earlier still hanging beside the fridge. My mom walked room to room, touching things gently, like the house might wake up if she moved too fast. My dad went straight into practical mode. He checked the breaker panel, the taps, the furnace, the locks. He kept saying things like, "not bad," and "fixable," which I learned later meant, "This is worse than I expected, but I don't want your mother to panic." I picked the smaller bedroom upstairs because it faced east, away from the barn. Ellie got the bigger one and still complained. That first week was boring, exhausting, and kind of peaceful. We cleaned constantly. We hauled boxes. We took trips into town for groceries, paint, mouse traps, and every tool my dad suddenly decided he needed. The town itself barely had anything. A gas station, a diner, a small grocery store, a post office, and a hardware store run by a man named Earl, who seemed to know every bad thing that had ever happened within 50 miles. When my mom mentioned we were Victor Bell's family, Earl's smile faded a little. "Vic's place," he said. My dad nodded. "That's the one." Earl looked at me, then at Ellie, then back to my parents. "You folks staying out there?" "For now," my mom said. Earl wiped his hands on a rag, even though they weren't dirty. "Road gets bad after rain." My dad smiled. "We've got 4-wheel drive." "That's not what I meant." Nobody said anything for a second. Then Earl changed the subject and helped us find weather stripping. I told myself he was just a small-town guy being dramatic. Every place has stories. Every old house has rumors. That doesn't mean anything. But that night, I noticed my mom standing at the kitchen sink after dinner, looking out across the field behind the house. She looked worried. "What?" I asked. She blinked, like I had caught her doing something private. "Nothing." I looked past her through the window. The field was dark except for a pale strip of moonlight on the stubble. "What are you looking at?" She shook her head. "I thought I saw a light." "Like a car?" "Maybe." My dad came in carrying plates. "Probably a tractor." "At this hour?" my mom asked. He shrugged. "Farmers are weird." That was the first off moment. Small enough to ignore. Easy enough to explain. I told myself it was nothing. The next night I saw it too. I was upstairs in my room, lying on the mattress with my phone held up near the window because that was the only place I could get 1 bar. I was texting my friend Mason, complaining about how bad the Wi-Fi was, when something bright moved in the corner of my eye. I looked out. Far across the south field, near the dark line of trees, 2 lights drifted side by side. They were low to the ground and yellowish, not white like modern headlights. They moved slowly, bobbing a little, like a vehicle crossing rough land. There was no road there. I knew that because Dad and I had walked the property earlier that day. The field stretched all the way to a fence line. No trail, no driveway, no tire ruts, just cut wheat stubble and dirt. Still, I told myself it had to be some kind of farm equipment. Maybe there was an access road hidden behind the trees. Maybe depth was weird at night. Maybe I didn't know what I was looking at. The lights continued for maybe a minute, moving from left to right. Then they stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Both lights went still. I watched them for another 30 seconds. Then they vanished at the same time. I didn't sleep well after that. In the morning, I asked my dad if anyone had permission to drive through the field. He was under the kitchen sink, fixing a leak, and didn't answer right away. "What field?" "The south one." "No," he said. "Why?" "I saw lights out there last night." He slid out from under the sink and looked at me. "What kind of lights?" "Like headlights, but smaller maybe." He exchanged a glance with my mom. "I noticed it. You saw them too?" I asked. My mom dried her hands slowly on a dish towel. "I thought I did." Ellie, sitting at the table with cereal, said, "Great. Ghost tractors." My dad gave her a look. "Enough. I'm joking." "No, you're trying to scare yourself." She rolled her eyes, but she looked pleased that it worked. Dad said he'd check the field after breakfast. He did. I went with him. It was cold that morning, the kind of dry prairie cold that sits in your nose and throat. The field behind the house was rough and uneven, full of short yellow stubble that scratched at our jeans. We walked in the direction where I had seen the lights. There were no tire tracks. None. The dirt was soft in some places from rain earlier that week, so if a truck or tractor had crossed, we should have seen something. My dad crouched a few times, inspecting the ground. He didn't say much. We walked almost to the tree line. Nothing. No road. No path. No sign anyone had been there. On the way back, my dad said, "Could have been on the road beyond the field." "There's no road beyond the field. There's always some road." He said it too quickly, like he needed that to be true. The third night, the lights came back. This time all four of us saw them. We were in the living room watching an old DVD because the internet barely worked. The wind was strong that night, pressing against the walls and making the house creak like it was settling into itself. Ellie was half asleep on the couch. My mom was folding laundry. Dad was pretending to read an instruction manual for a space heater. Then the room brightened slightly. Not a flash. More like a soft yellow glow moved across the wall. My mom froze with a towel in her hands. Dad looked up. I already knew. We went to the back window together. Two lights were crossing the field. Closer than before. Still far, but definitely closer. They moved slowly, side by side, dipping and rising in a rhythm that looked wrong for a vehicle. Headlights stay fixed relative to each other. These didn't. One would lift slightly while the other dropped, then they'd switch, like they were being carried. My sister whispered, "What is that?" Nobody answered. The lights moved for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. This time, they did not disappear. They stayed there. Two yellow points in the field, facing the house. It felt stupid to be scared of lights. They were just lights. But the way they stopped made my skin tighten. It felt intentional. Like whoever was out there had reached the spot they wanted. My dad opened the back door. Cold air rushed into the room. "Hey!" he shouted into the dark. The lights did not move. "Can I help you?" His voice traveled out and got swallowed by the field. No answer. My mom said quietly, "Don't go out there." Dad looked at her like that was exactly what he had been planning to do. "I'm just going to." "No." There was something in her voice that shut him up. We watched the lights for another minute. Then they went out. Together. Ellie started crying after that, not loudly, just wiping her face angrily like she hated herself for it. My dad tried to act annoyed. "It's probably kids," he said. "Someone messing around." "Kids from where?" I asked. He didn't answer. That night, I woke up at 2:17 in the morning. I know because I checked my phone. The house was quiet except for the wind. Then I heard footsteps downstairs. Slow footsteps. At first, I thought it was my dad. He sometimes got up to check the furnace or get water. But these steps were wrong. Too light. Too careful. I sat up in bed. The floorboards creaked in the hallway outside my room. Not downstairs anymore. Upstairs. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the whisper of footsteps from the hallway made me freeze, every nerve screaming that I was not imagining this. The steps stopped outside Ellie's door. I got out of bed slowly. My room was cold enough that my feet hurt on the floor. I opened my door just a crack. The hallway was dark except for a thin gray rectangle of moonlight from the window at the end. No one was there, but Ellie's door was open. I stepped into the hallway. "Ellie?" I whispered. No answer. I walked to her room and looked in. She was asleep in bed, turned toward the wall. Her window curtain was wide open, and outside her window, far across the field, the two lights were there again. Closer. They stood in the dark like eyes. The next morning, Ellie swore she hadn't opened her curtain. She always slept with it closed because she said the fields looked too empty at night. My mom believed her immediately. Dad didn't. Not because he thought Ellie was lying, exactly, but because believing her meant believing something worse. I probably opened it when I was cleaning, Mom said. You didn't, Ellie said. You might not remember. I remember being scared of that window, Mom. That ended the conversation. Or at least it ended the part we said out loud. Things got worse in small ways after that. The back door was found unlocked twice, even though Dad checked it every night. One morning there was mud on the kitchen floor in a line from the door to the basement stairs. Not boot prints exactly, more like wet marks, narrow and uneven, as if someone had come in with dirt clinging to their feet. My dad blamed me at first. I told him I hadn't gone outside. Then he blamed Ellie. She screamed at him, which turned into a family fight so normal and ugly that for a while we forgot to be scared. But later that day, Mom found the basement door open. The basement was unfinished, just concrete, shelves of old jars, boxes, and a furnace that knocked loudly when it started. It smelled damp and metallic. I hated going down there. Mom called Dad over. He went down with a flashlight. I stood at the top of the stairs. Anything? Mom asked. Dad didn't answer. Tom. When he came back up, his face looked wrong. He held a mason jar in one hand. Inside it was soil. Dark soil, wet enough to stick to the glass. What is that? I asked. Dad set it on the kitchen counter. It was on the workbench. So, he looked at my mom. There were 6 of them. 6 jars? He nodded. All full of dirt? All labeled. My mom swallowed. Labeled how? Dad hesitated. Then he said, names. We went down together after that. I didn't want to, but I did. On the basement workbench sat 6 mason jars arranged in a neat row. Each had a strip of masking tape across the front, and each strip had a name written in black marker. Margaret, Samuel, Isaac, Ruth, Caleb, Anna. No last names, no dates, just names. My mom said, were these Uncle Vic's? Dad picked one up and turned it slowly. Must be. Ellie stood halfway up the stairs, refusing to come lower. What kind of psycho keeps labeled dirt? Nobody answered. In the corner of the basement, behind some old boards, we found a metal trunk. It was locked, but the lock was rusted enough that Dad broke it with a hammer. Inside were papers, old land documents, yellowed newspaper clippings, a few photographs, and a leather notebook with Victor Bell written inside the cover in shaky handwriting. My mom took it upstairs and spent most of the afternoon reading. She didn't tell us what was in it right away. That night, the lights came back, but there were more of them. Not 2, 6. They appeared at the far side of the field just after midnight, spread out in a loose line. 6 yellow lights, bobbing slowly toward the house. My heart sank into my stomach as the back door clicked shut behind me after I stepped onto the porch, and I realized I was completely alone for one terrible second. Someone was watching, and I had no way out there in that open dark. I had only gone outside because my dad was already on the porch with a flashlight, and I thought he knew I was behind him. But the wind pulled the door closed, and suddenly the house felt very far away. Dad, I said. He didn't answer. He was staring at the field. The lights moved closer. Slow. Steady. Not headlights. Not anymore. You can lie to yourself about 2 lights. You can call them a truck, a tractor, a reflection, anything. You can't do that with 6. They moved independently, each one swaying slightly. The glow was soft and warm, the kind of light you see from old camping lanterns. My dad raised his flashlight and shouted, "This is private property." The lights kept coming. My mom opened the back door behind us. Tom. Inside. Now. Dad didn't move. Tom. He lowered the flashlight. Then, from somewhere across the field, a sound carried through the wind. Singing. Very faint. Not music exactly. More like a group of people humming the same low melody with no words. Ellie screamed from inside the house. That broke whatever spell Dad was under. He grabbed my arm and pulled me inside so fast I stumbled. My mom locked the door. Then Dad shoved a chair under the knob, even though it opened inward and the chair probably wouldn't help. It didn't matter. He needed to do something. The four of us stood in the kitchen, breathing hard. The singing continued outside. Soft, patient, closer. Mom finally told us what was in Uncle Vic's notebook. Her voice shook while she explained it, and I could tell she was trying to leave out anything too scary for Ellie, but there was no way to make it okay. Back in the early 1900s, before the current farmhouse was built, there had been another house on the property. Not exactly where ours stood, but close. A family lived there. The Bell family, distant relatives of ours. There had been a winter storm. A bad one. The kind that used to trap people for days. According to the old newspaper clipping, 6 people from a neighboring homestead had disappeared while trying to walk to the Bell place for shelter. Their wagon had broken down, or their horses had gotten loose. The details changed depending on which note you read. They never made it. When spring came, searchers found signs they had crossed the south field. Then nothing. No bodies. No graves. No clear answer. Years later, when the land changed hands and the old house was torn down, there were rumors that the Bell family had found them and buried them quietly in the field to avoid blame for not helping. Other rumors said they had been turned away. Others said they had arrived, and something worse happened. Uncle Vic became obsessed with it. His notebook was full of sketches of the field, measurements, dates, and descriptions of lights. He wrote that the lights appeared every few years at first, then more often after the new farmhouse was built. He believed the buried people were still trying to reach the house. Not our house exactly. The old house. The one that had stood where the field now met the yard. And every year, erosion and farming and shifting soil had brought their path closer to the current farmhouse. My dad said, "This is insane," but he didn't sound convinced. Mom held up the notebook. Vic wrote that they stop where the door used to be. Ellie whispered, "What happens when they reach it?" Mom didn't answer. Outside, the singing stopped. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Then someone knocked on the back door. 3 slow knocks. I felt the sound in my ribs. Nobody moved. The knock came again. 3 slow knocks. Then a woman's voice said, "Please." My mom covered her mouth. The voice was thin and tired, muffled by the door. "Please let us in." Ellie started crying again. Dad stepped toward the door. Mom grabbed his sleeve. "No, she sounds hurt," he whispered. "Tom, no." The woman knocked again. "Please. The children are cold." That sentence did something to my dad. I saw it. His face changed, like a hook had gone into him and pulled. He had always been soft when it came to kids. He was the kind of dad who complained about having to drive Ellie somewhere, then waited in the parking lot with snacks and the heat running. He reached for the chair under the knob. I grabbed his wrist. "Dad." He looked down at me like he didn't know who I was. From outside, the woman said, "We can see the light." That made all of us look at the window. The kitchen curtains were open. Beyond the glass, 6 lanterns stood at the edge of the yard, and behind them were people. Not clear, not fully. Shapes in old coats, long skirts, hats pulled low, faces shadowed by lantern glow. They stood in a line just beyond the dead grass, where the field ended and the yard began. One of them was shorter than the others. A child. My sister made a sound I had never heard from her before. My dad stepped back from the door. The woman outside said, "You have room." Then the doorknob turned. Slowly. Left. Right. The chair scraped against the floor as pressure pushed from the other side. Mom screamed. Dad threw his shoulder against the door. I rushed to help him, pressing both hands flat against the wood, useless but desperate. The door shook under us. The knob kept twisting back and forth. The old house groaned. Upstairs, something heavy dragged across the floor. Then another knock came. Not from the back door. From the front. 3 slow knocks. Then the basement door. 3 knocks from below. The sound moved through the house like it was learning the layout. Front door, back door, basement, upstairs window. My sister screamed. They're at my window. Mom ran to her and pulled her away from the stairs. Dad shouted at me to grab his phone. I ran to the counter. No signal. Of course. The landline had been disconnected years before. We had talked about installing one. We hadn't gotten around to it. That's the thing about danger. It always finds the task you said you'd do later. The back door jolted hard. The chair leg snapped. Dad stumbled back. For 1 second, the door opened a crack. Cold air poured in. Not autumn cold. Winter cold. Deep, bitter, impossible cold, carrying the smell of frozen dirt and smoke. A hand slipped through the gap. Thin. Gray. Not bloody. Not rotted like in a movie. Just wrong. Dried out. Soil packed beneath the nails. A hand that had spent too long underground and still remembered how to reach. My mom screamed, "Tom." Dad slammed the door shut on the hand. There was no cry of pain, just pressure from the other side. Steady. Patient. I grabbed the cast iron pan from the stove and brought it down on the fingers. Once. Twice. The hand slid back out. Dad threw the deadbolt. The deadbolt turned by itself. Unlocked. He grabbed it and twisted it back. It turned again. Unlocked. He swore, held it in place with both hands, and shouted, "Go! Get to the truck!" The truck was parked out front. To reach it, we had to leave through the mudroom side door and cross 20 feet of open yard. It felt impossible, but staying inside felt worse. Mom grabbed Ellie. I grabbed the emergency flashlight from the junk drawer. Dad took his keys with one hand and held a fireplace poker in the other. We ran for the side door. The hallway felt longer than it had that morning. I know that sounds dramatic, but it did. The house seemed to lean inward, every old board creaking under us. As we passed the living room, I saw faces at the window, not pressed to the glass, reflected in it, standing behind us. I spun around. No one was there. The street looked ordinary in memory, quiet, even comforting when I thought of our old life in Regina. But my gut told me this place had never been ordinary. I'd learned too late that danger often wears a friendly face, and sometimes it wears the shape of a home your family thinks it inherited. Dad opened the side door. Rain and wind hit us. Not normal rain. Freezing rain, sharp and heavy, though the forecast had been clear. The yard was dark except for the lanterns, now moving around the house. We ran. Ellie slipped on the wet steps, and Mom nearly fell trying to hold her up. Dad shouted, "Keep going." I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling, as I fumbled with the truck door handle. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was conspiring against me. The truck unlocked with a chirp that sounded absurdly modern and weak in all that darkness. Mom shoved Ellie into the back seat. I climbed in after her. Dad got behind the wheel. The engine started, then sputtered, then caught. Lanterns moved in the mirrors. One on the left, two behind us, three by the barn. The figures were walking slowly, but somehow they were everywhere. Dad threw the truck in reverse. The tires spun in mud. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on." The truck lurched backward. A lantern appeared directly behind us. Dad slammed the brakes. For half a second, the figure stood in the red glow of the brake lights. A man in an old dark coat, face pale and hollow, holding a lantern at chest height. His eyes were open, but there was no anger in them. That was almost worse. He looked tired, like he had been walking for 100 years and had finally arrived. His mouth opened. We heard his voice through the glass. "You kept the door." Then he was gone. Dad backed up hard, turned the wheel, and sped down the approach toward the grid road. Behind us, the farmhouse lights flickered on and off even though no one was inside. As we reached the road, Ellie screamed. I looked back. The field behind the house was full of lanterns. Not 6 anymore. Dozens. Maybe more. They stretched across the dark prairie in uneven rows, all moving toward the house, following the same invisible path through the field. The driveway was rough and wet. Dad took the turn too fast, and the truck fishtailed onto the grid road. Mom yelled his name. Ellie sobbed into her hoodie. I turned around and watched the farmhouse shrink behind us, its windows glowing yellow. At the upstairs window, in Ellie's room, someone stood watching us leave. Small, child-sized, holding a lantern. We drove to Earl's hardware store because it was the only place in town with lights still on. It turned out Earl lived in the apartment above the store. Dad banged on the door until Earl came down in pajama pants and a coat, holding a baseball bat. When he saw us, soaked and shaking, his expression changed. He didn't ask many questions. He just said, "You saw them." My mom started crying then. Not loud, just collapsed into herself. Earl led us inside, made coffee none of us drank, and called the RCMP. 2 officers came out about 40 minutes later. They listened carefully, but you could tell they were sorting our story into normal boxes. Trespassers, local prank, stress, maybe carbon monoxide. They drove us back to the property just before dawn. I begged my parents not to go. They said we had to. Our things were there. Our documents, my mom's jewelry, Ellie's school laptop, everything. The house was quiet when we arrived. The sky was turning pale gray over the fields, and the prairie looked harmless again. Wet grass, muddy tire tracks, birds moving along the fence line. There were no lanterns, no figures, no singing, but the back door was open. Inside, the kitchen floor was covered in dirt. Not scattered, not tracked in, covered. A thick layer of dark soil spread from the back door to the basement stairs, then through the hallway, then into the living room. It looked like someone had poured the field into the house. The officers went room to room. Nobody was inside. In the basement, the 6 mason jars were broken on the floor, all of them empty. The notebook was gone, so were the old photographs and clippings. The officers treated it as a break-in. They took pictures. They asked if anything valuable was missing. My dad said no, not really. Earl stood on the porch while all of this happened. He looked out at the south field and said nothing. When the officers left, my mom asked him what he knew. He kept his eyes on the field. Vic used to come into town some mornings looking like he hadn't slept, Earl said. He'd buy nails, locks, boards. Said the house was moving. The house? My dad asked. Earl nodded. Not the building. The house that used to be there. Said its door was still somewhere in the field, and every year it got closer. That doesn't make any sense, Dad said. No, Earl replied. It doesn't. My mom asked why he didn't warn us. He looked ashamed then. I tried. People don't listen to warnings that sound crazy. He was right. We wouldn't have. Not before. We left that day. We took what we could fit in the truck and never spent another night there. My parents tried to sell the land, but deals kept falling through. One buyer backed out after walking the south field. Another said his dog refused to get out of the truck. A neighboring farmer offered almost nothing for it, then withdrew the offer the next morning without explanation. Eventually, my mom signed paperwork allowing the municipality to take over the property for unpaid taxes and maintenance issues. She acted like she didn't care, but I saw her cry when the final notice came. Not because we lost the house, because some part of her felt like she had escaped something that had been waiting for our family specifically. Years passed. We moved back to Regina, into a smaller rental house. Dad found another job. Mom went back to the dental office. Ellie started sleeping with blackout curtains and a chair against her bedroom door. I finished school, moved out, and built a life that looks normal from the outside. But certain things stayed with me. I don't like fields at night. I don't like seeing distant lights where no road should be. I don't like old farmhouses with dark windows and windbreak trees pressed around them. And I hate lanterns, even decorative ones, especially decorative ones. 3 years after we left, I drove near Bracken for work. I told myself I wouldn't go by the property, but curiosity is a stupid thing. It convinces you that looking is harmless. The farmhouse was still there, smaller than I remembered, more weathered. The porch had partially collapsed, and the barn roof had caved in on one side. Weeds had grown high around the yard. The south field was unplanted, just wild grass moving in the wind. It was late afternoon, not night. Safe. That's what I told myself. I stopped on the road and looked from the truck window. For a while, nothing happened. Then I noticed something in the field. A line. Not a fence, not a ditch. A narrow path through the grass, pressed flat in a straight route from the far tree line toward the house. It ended at the back door. The back door was open. I drove away. I didn't tell my parents for months. When I finally told my mom, she didn't seem surprised. She just sat quietly at the kitchen table, rubbing her thumb over the edge of her coffee mug. Then she said something I still think about. Maybe they weren't trying to hurt us. I asked what she meant. She said, maybe they were just trying to come in from the cold. That should have made it less frightening. It didn't, because need can be just as dangerous as hate. A starving person doesn't have to despise you to take your food. A freezing person doesn't have to be evil to force open your door. And whatever walked across that field had been cold for a very long time. Even after escaping, even after the safety of town lights and locked doors and normal streets behind me, a small, cold part of me couldn't stop replaying the figures I'd seen from the truck. The calm, empty eyes that didn't blink, the lanterns held close, the way they walked like they had all the time in the world. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what happened. It's knowing the path is still there. It's knowing that every night, somewhere out on that prairie, those lights may still rise at the tree line and begin their slow walk home. And if they ever reach your door, I don't think it matters whether you inherited the house, bought it, or only stopped there to get out of the storm. They don't care who lives there now. They only remember that once a door stayed closed. And they have been knocking ever since.